Good afternoon. First thing on our agenda is a special session, so I'll entertain a motion to go into special session.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of going into special session, please say aye. Any opposed, say no. We are in special session. The first item is to consider the approval of an ordinance authorizing the purchase of 278 South Prospect Street.
Mayor, I hereby move for the mayor and city council to approve an ordinance authorizing the purchase of property located at 278 South Prospect Street for city's ownership program. The acquisition of 278 South Prospect Street is consistent with the city center plan, catalytic project number 8, the city's housing and neighborhood vision, and the 2015 goals and priorities established by the mayor and city council. Proposed purchase price is $72,000 and will be funded with state community legacy grant funds.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Munson, seconded by Mr. Metzner. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to say something. This is a great project created for us by our staff. We are getting a house which is assessed, if I remember correctly, at $243,000, a lot of money. We're getting it for $72,000, and then we're getting a $100,000 grant to pay the $72,000 plus repair the house at 278. And I just think our staff deserves kudos and lots of kudos for pulling that off. That's almost like pulling a rabbit out of a hat.
Mm-hmm. I'll add to that we did all receive an email of support from the neighborhood, one of the representatives of the neighborhood's first group up there, who are very much in support of this effort and efforts like it that we've been taking in their neighborhoods. So they appreciate this kind of action.
I think that the other important component historically is if you look at our track record over the last 10 or 15 years within programs such as this, we've identified houses from time to time, often half doubles in areas of the city where market is less competitive, and we probably have a few of those units still sitting in our pocket, so to speak, for sale because they're difficult to market. I think that the economic climate forced us to recognize that we need to focus on houses such as this that decrease the density of the rental number in certain neighborhoods and increase our potential for return on marketable houses. And you know, I can recall probably 6 years ago looking at this house myself, and it was on the market for around $250,000, $300,000, and it being just simply out of my range of you know, ability. And I think the assessment reflects that, and I think the market will reflect that we'll be able to return this type of house back into private hands a lot more quickly than some of the other units we've purchased in the past.
Any other discussion? Motion being made. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. The ayes have it. The ordinance is approved. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the city administrator's employment agreement.
Mayor, I hereby move for the approval of a 4-year employment agreement as attached with Valerie Means to serve as city administrator. The term of the contract is June 15th, 2015 through June 14th, 2019.
Second again.
Motion made by Mr. Brubaker, seconded by Mr. Munson. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no.
No.
The motion carries. Thank you very much. That concludes our special session. We will move into the work session, but we will skip the first 2 items because our guests have not arrived yet and move right on into our budget discussion.
You're right on time, Mr.
Now we're on time.
Good evening, or good afternoon.
Welcome back.
I am going to start just by passing around a spreadsheet that has several scenarios on here. I think that was what I was tasked to do when we ended the meeting last week. And these scenarios all involve ways to identify and fund $1.2 million in funding for the general fund for our fiscal year 16 budget. There's no specific names or anything attached to these. These are simply different options and scenarios as we've discussed. They're very similar, have very similar items. One of the things all of them have in common is the elimination or the removal of a 5-cent tax rate increase. 2 out of the 3 scenarios do, however, include adding back a total of 2 cents, a half a cent for adjusting the tax rate to come back to our constant yield notice, and another 1.5 cents to adjust our tax rate to get back to the county differential, which was 12.5 cents removed back in fiscal year 11. We raised 11 cents last year. This 1.5 cents gets back that total of 12.5 cents. Some of the other categories, and we can kind of walk through them if that's what we wish to do, or, okay. 2 out of the 3 scenarios keep a public works supervisor in the fiscal year 16 budget. 2 out of the 3 scenarios include savings from a position lapse of $130,000. All include a reduction in general fund capital improvement project expenditures. May differ in dollar amounts, but again, all include reducing. All 3 across the board have a reduction in economic redevelopment contributions from the general fund by $100,000. All 3 scenarios include reducing operating budget for police. Again, different dollar amounts, but they all include a dollar amount to do that. 1 of the 3 include reduction in the fire department's overall operating. And then one of the bigger items is the use of fund balance reserves. So all 3 include using fund balance reserves, but again, in different dollar increments. $375,000, $250,000, or $120,000. 2 of the 3 include holding the police and fire pension retirement contribution at the current fiscal year 15 dollar amount of $1.2 million. And 1 of the 3 include a reduction in our annual debt service. And that is a change from what I originally brought back to the table last week. So in all 3 of these scenarios get us back to the $1.2 million. Would we like to discuss any one of the scenarios or any one of the topics? I know we had discussion last week.
Before we discuss, I'd like to make something, clarify something. The item number 2 in my original list, which is basically scenario A, you've relabeled it a little bit, but scenario A, let's call it. The second item under expenses, position lapse increase. I knew that at the time this was formulated, that we would be having a vacancy in high-level position, the highest level position in community and economic development. However, because Council Member Nye last week said that she would prefer that position to be eliminated, I thought at the end of council comments, when we weren't in a discussion period, and I appreciate her, she's certainly entitled to her point of view. I have no problem with her expressing her point of view. But I need to say, what I propose is that we get that much salary and benefit savings from the higher level positions in that department. And thus, if the current administrator, the new administrator, want to put someone, and I would say in an acting position, which is what I would highly recommend, until the new administrator can see how she wants to set up that department and those functions in that department, which are done all kinds of different ways everywhere, that it would be filled from in-house, and then that position held vacant and responsibilities assigned among the professional management accordingly, to yield approximately those funds in salary and benefits. It does not require, in fact, I do not recommend eliminating the position. I just recommend a setup that we can get through. When that is filled as an acting position, it's not habitual to award a full director's salary. It's usually a few grades temporary amount until the person remains, there's a reorganization, or the person doesn't remain. So that is it was my intent all along. I wanted to clarify it. It's just an opportunity that we have in a department where I think we can make those adjustments. So that's where I went. I hope that's clear.
It's not today.
Okay.
Are you proposing we keep the 130,000
Yes.
in the budget?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, not that we put it in the budget, that we keep it as a cut.
Keep the lapse increase.
I am proposing that we keep that.
Cut the funding.
Okay. We cut the funding. We call it lapse. Again, you leave a position open. It doesn't have to be the director's position.
So we're
We leave
going to
the-
unfund the position.
We're going to unfund that amount of money in
Okay.
salary lapse,
I got you.
generally,
I got you. I'm on board.
Not position specific.
not position specific.
I'm on board.
Okay.
We're taking that amount of money out of the budget.
Right.
Okay.
And that's where I'm saying it's coming from a combination of moves in that department, a
Is that a-
scenario of which I just outlined.
Is that a reasonable figure? I mean, how did you come up with that?
The
amount?
only, well, how did I come up with it?
Yeah.
That's, and I think I hit it pretty close. That was the salary and benefits of the
Okay.
departing person.
Okay.
And Michelle verified that.
All right, my question is that when this position was made, it would have been when? Because it was during you and Lou. Okay, so how long?
I think it was last term. I don't remember what year it was.
Okay, well, I mean, it's important because the position has not been. This was a position that was a new position.
It was May of 2010.
Okay, all right. Because there are people that I feel can handle all of what John was doing, all right? Now, if the new administrator, and that's why I said, is that, you know, I don't see the purpose of it staying.
Well,
I personally, I hope that the new administrator will be able to get herself in a position that she will be able to gain that ability very quickly and see what is happening in that department, because there are good people in that department. And I really don't feel that that position should have been a position that should have been there originally.
Well,
But I wasn't here to argue that fact,
I
all
would-
right? Now, you're saying let it go as is, we're just not going to fund it, we're gonna put aside, like with the 22 other positions that are put to the side. All right,
We're
that
gonna
was
put
not,
that amount of salary lapse.
yeah.
But I would argue the other way. I would argue that it's been set up that way now for a while, and that the new administrator, indeed, will have a chance after getting her feet on the ground and looking at it, say, is this the way I want to do it, or is there another way I want to do it? There are ways in between what you expressed at council, which is go back to all the separate, departments all reporting to the administrator. There's ways in between as well. So,
What I hear the consensus is let the new administrator decide.
well, yeah, this
How
would
to
allow the new
reorganize if
administrator,
at all.
only we would say, she would need to know, we've targeted that amount of lapse, so, you fill a position, you're not going to meet the budget.
Right.
Now, if she comes back with a reorganization and has other ways of dealing with money, I'm sure we would listen to it. We can make mid-year adjustments. So that's, I just wanted to clarify that that's where I was going. And I think, indeed, Penny, argue your case, with
Well,
her.
and that's exactly
But
right.
I don't think we should decide it ahead of time. I think we should go in like this. And,
But I just feel that the new administrator coming in should be able to make that choice. Now,
well, she
as
will be
far
able
as,
to.
right, and as far as anybody stepping up now, are you saying that there should be an interim?
yes.
Okay?
I'm
And-
saying there can be.
Okay, but
I
in
think-
that, are we talking pay? again, as raising,
As I
okay,
said
a
a minute
salary.
ago, when you appoint an acting, they get a bump in their current
Correct.
salary. They don't assume and it's not a
And I
huge
know
bump
that,
because it's an
and I know
acting
that, but it doesn't
position.
matter, because, you
It's
know.
a small bump.
But it doesn't matter, you know?
It does
To me, it doesn't, because there are people that are qualified to be able to handle that department,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And, I mean, the department was run before and really did not have enough, but I'm not seeing what I wanted to see to begin with when this position was put in place.
Mm-hmm.
I still am not. It's out there. There are things that have not happened, okay? And I don't think that one individual sitting at that top rung is going to say, hey, this is going to be a change. I don't see it happening. I think that everybody that is working there is going to do their level best to do what they can do to help the city to move forward.
Right.
And that is my argument.
But
I
they-
just
but
not,
they need someone to report to.
Yeah,
but then
I
you
think-
know what? We might as well go ahead and go back.
No,
We might as well go
no.
back to where it was.
Well, let's not,
Not
hold
either
on, time
You
out.
know? No,
Because
I
we're-
mean,
well, we're-
but that is the point, okay?
Well, we're getting sort of off the topic, which is the budget, and getting more into operational kinds of issues, which I think we should avoid. But going back, it sounds like there's consensus then to keep position lapse increase in the scenarios that we're
As a
looking at.
cut in expenditures.
Is that my understanding?
State what your understanding is, because
That Marty and what I've heard Kristen say now is also that they would support keeping the 130 in there as a cut. That the position's not being cut, but that the budget in that department for position lapse will reflect this cut.
well, I don't support that. And I don't support it because essentially we're handicapping the new administrator. We're telling her, you know, we have this situation, you can fix it, but we're not going to give you enough money to fix it.
Well, I think under the
Well, I
scenario
don't
that
think
Marty's
it's a foregone
outlining,
conclusion. I mean, I've worked at almost every one of these scenarios. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that that's accurate. I think we want her to take a look at it and see if she thinks she can
because if there
perform
is an
those
acting,
functions. I don't think there's any magic number to the number of professionals. I think, so there, you know, there's several issues there to perform all those functions. And if she wants to come back and find the money somewhere else, we just need to badly find money in this budget, and I think it can be done, in my opinion.
I don't hear you saying you want the position cut, which is the position
I
of
didn't say I wanted the
Councilmember Nye.
position, I want the equivalent, the salary
But
equivalent
that
cut.
it's possible to have an acting person who
We'd have an
can
acting
report to the
person
new
who would
administrator.
Probably retain most of their duties, and
Marty, I agree with you with regard to an acting person, but an acting person is going to require some additional money. That person, and I've come to the conclusion there's only one person who's qualified, is probably going to want additional money, and we're going to have to get it somewhere, and essentially, we're going to have to get it out of what you're trying to save here. So that number is going to go way down. An acting person could act in that job for 2 years, and then we could appoint that person as non-acting at that point, a person who would have had an incredible experience with the job and could do it well. But
You can-
I just,
you can
if
twist
we're not
this
going to give them
around
any,
and say you're handing the new person another $130,000 budget problem if we fund it, because it's, you know, the problem repeats itself next year. If, in going through the budget, trying to reach budget goals, this is not her objective, then we'll hear about it. But I think we need to save, and this is what I'd recommend, and I guess professionally, I think it can work as an interim solution.
I'm sorry, you haven't convinced me.
Mr. Metzner, how do you feel about it? So
agree
it
more
sounds like there's a slim majority that supports the position lapse for DCED.
Well, I think Penny supports it, she doesn't agree
I
with
just
it.
said eliminate the job.
Right,
I
you're supposed to
support
eliminate
it,
the
but it's a
position.
matter of
She'd rather
eliminating
eliminate the job,
position.
so
Right.
But I
it's
support
not
what
slim.
you're saying
It's
in
a-
general,
it's a
okay?
In terms of budget
I
savings.
just, you know,
So-
and that's,
If you don't mind me characterizing.
no, but my problem is, again, Marty, is that when we're looking at this budget, and I know that there's qualified people, and it's still adding, and I don't care if it's $5,000. It is still money. It's just like what came in here with the ones that said, okay, gee, I need $5,000 to do the BMX track. We're still looking at money.
Well,
And, you know,
We're
and
looking at reducing it 130.
I know that, but still, you're gonna take out of that pot because we're gonna move
Okay.
somebody else up. So how much are we talking?
Yeah,
I'm looking at Michelle.
Well, we can-
I'm looking at
It's an
Michelle.
it's
I'm
an,
not looking at
It's
it's
either
a
of
known
you.
unknown.
But if we want to
Right.
put a placeholder number, the variation.
Well, first off,
The variation is far less than the variation in the estimate of lapse that's already in the budget.
Well, and when
It's-
we're looking at an interim, that is gonna be debatable too.
There's already
As
a
named.
built-in huge variation on the amount of lapse that administrators and the budget officers build into the budget. We accept it at a certain level. I chose to be specific rather than just say, take it out of lapse in general, because I thought that was a place we could do it and still maintain our programs.
Well, let's-
I respect Dawn's position, and I'll be glad to talk to you some more.
Well, how can the new administrator put a part-time, not part-time, an acting person in, even if it only costs $1,000 or $2,000 a
Well,
month? How can the new
again, there's
administrator
all
do it
kinds of-
if we take all the money away for the position?
There's all kinds of ways of running a department. I'm saying run the department leaner, in effect, is what I'm saying.
Moving on to, I'm thinking we should just kind of hit each category and see where we can find the consensus. Public Works Supervisor?
Wait a minute, before we move
Sure,
on there.
sure.
Michelle, I'd like you to talk about the $130,000. That really doesn't sound like enough money, considering benefits and everything else, retirements, payouts, all kinds. That doesn't sound like kind of savings that we're going to have as a practical matter.
And I agree, which is why one of the scenarios did not include that. In our budget, in a general fund, originally, we recommended in total across the general fund, $150,000 in generic lapse and vacancy savings. And what we find that has happened over time is lapse and vacancy savings is one of those things where the savings always appear on paper and in theory that they should be a higher, I know.
But this is
But-
not the same.
I understand. That should be more, but what happens when a person leaves is we do have payouts, so that impacts the dollars that we spend. So you don't necessarily see the savings from that until the next fiscal year. But depending on the types of positions, then sometimes we backfill the workload with overtime or backfill with additional part-time people. Because when a person leaves, we don't shift the workload doesn't go away, the workload stays the same. So dependent upon the position.
Well,
The 150 is your cushion within that
In the general
entire-
fund.
That-
Yeah, within that
that's
entire
for all
side of the general fund.
positions.
Yeah.
Correct. So the
that's why I
150.
aimed this at a specific
Okay.
place.
Correct. So the 150 plus the 130 is overall 280,000.
It's like, say again, the 130 is.
The 130 plus the 150 would mean, in essence, we would be looking at $280,000 in the general fund as a savings, in that type of category.
And
150 overall and 130 specifically.
You said I had the right number for the savings, and if it's managed the way we want it managed, you may not save this much, so take 20,000 out of it for salary and benefit upgrades for enacting, and make it 110, and then, and as for your first thing, any severance is partially made up by the fact that the position could be vacant for a while, or will be vacant, and in 15. So,
Right.
so some of what you're talking about will be gained by the vacancy in 15 from the time of departure until June 30th.
Right, the
So
specific
we can argue
scenarios.
all around this, but this is a pretty good ballpark. I think you admit that.
I would venture to say that it's also staff's position that the Public Works Supervisor should remain in the budget
At this time, that is the
under
recommendation.
something like scenario C, where both of those positions are filled and funded. So, what is the consensus of the council on the Public Works Supervisor? I don't know if we nailed this down last week. Under these scenarios, I know Councilmember
You know,
Brubaker supports
again,
the Supervisor Labs.
I made this recommendation. Pardon?
Isn't that the discussion we just had?
This is the 70,000 for the Public Works Supervisor, which staff has restored in scenarios B and C. I wasn't sure where you were, Chris. I thought they were trying to follow you in B. But I think, again, we're talking about, let's not rock the existing boat too awfully much in terms of the overall structure for the DCED. And for Public Works, we're saying, let's do this before the new administrator comes in. And, you know, I just think next year's budget's time for her to decide, and if she wants to make a half-year recommendation, she can come back in and say, Eric's convinced me, or whomever. And again, I know it's hard out there, but, you know, it's hard financially, too. So,
So the idea being that if the new administrator is convinced that a public works supervisor is needed, and she
she
can make
can
the
persuade
necessary
her.
budget adjustments mid-year, that would be a possibility, or next
Right,
year in the
right.
budget.
But why go through all the hiring process, go through everything, and she's saying, well, I don't think that's the way I'd have done this. And so I don't think it's a good time to bring it in. With all due respect to Bruce, and I understand the reasons, but you just have to make decisions, you know. And we have a hard money situation.
I heard Kristen, did you say you seconded that? Keeping the,
Yeah, I think I'm generally in favor. I guess if I were to seek out a compromise, to Marty's point of, you know, if the administrator and the director have that discussion, and it's, you know, maybe the cure is you somehow combine the two and put it into the 130. You know, I mean, where it's a half year's savings. Does that make sense?
Well, you could fund the position in half a year and say, I'm sorry if I can interpret, I mean, aren't you saying put a half year of or leave a half year of funding in, take half a year of funding out? Is that,
Yeah, in other words, if you took the 130 and made it a clean 150, you know what I mean? And then you have.
well, but if we allow the position, then I don't see how that works, because that says they're gonna have other vacancies.
I'm just trying
And
to do
we don't have other vacancies. I mean, I agree with the administrator and Michelle on that. It's beyond the 150, and that's why I didn't recommend adding to the generalized 150.
For me, if there's an appetite by the majority for the proposed tax adjustments, then for me, the position is feasible. If not, then for me, it's not. So I guess we didn't even talk about that top issue, and so for me, you know, we're talking about
Yeah,
a
it
lot of
seems to be
cuts.
really the issue.
Yeah, and so for me, I'll be flat out, I'm comfortable with the top two items. I think that the 1.5 gets you back to square one on the differential, and I think you can't argue to keep up with constant yield only in the good times. You have to do it in the bad times, and so for
so the
me-
2 cents, in other words.
For me, both of those figures are
In terms of
responsible. Yeah.
I concur.
And I think they only better position your discussions of expense adjustments for FY17. In other words, I look at that revenue side as more of a, how do I prepare for 17, you know what I mean, as I start to have the discussions of the expenses. So for me, the top two.
But by adding these, you're certainly making it much more difficult in 17. That was one of my big points when I did my original chart.
What I'm saying is we have to answer the question if there is a majority in favor of the 1.5 and the half cent, the 2 cent adjustment first.
Well, I can't answer it unless I know what the package is. I can't just say, well, I'm in favor of 2-cent tax increase. I'd have to know what the package was.
And in a sense, we're trying to go through and figure out what that landscape looks like under the scenarios that we've been given.
Yeah.
Because all of them assume, well, 2 of them assume the 2 cent increase.
That's B's and C, right?
Right.
Yes.
So it's really the question of, we have the position lapse, those two things. There are a number of things, in terms of reducing the general fund CIP. Under scenario C, it's just broken down a little bit in terms of specific items.
And Michelle, I want to ask you a question. Are we going to have an enhanced discussion of the economic redevelopment item?
That was originally the goal, once we made it through the general fund, to come back and hit some of the other funds like
Well,
economic
that's-
redevelopment and
Okay, but I think that has an effect on that amount. So to me, it's hard to decide on all the rest of this, some of which aren't repeatable expenditures. They're just one-timers.
Well, we say to a certain degree that they're one-timers. I mean, I'm looking here at the scenario on use of fund balance, and that's clearly not a one-time thing.
It is. Under item C, it's one-time CIP projects.
I understand, but I mean, I'm looking at your sheet right here where it says FY 16, 375.
No, I propose doing it 2 years in a row.
And that's what I'm
Goes to
saying, so
750.
that isn't a one-time thing.
No, okay. I'm trying to make the case, mine were generally 2-year changes. A lot of these in the B and C aren't. That's all, that's the point I'm trying to make. Yes, the ones in the left hand, I was proposing for 2 years.
So you're saying you don't.
With a 2% increase, if that's what a majority decides, then you have more flexibility, but you still have a problem, a big problem in 17, because the city administrator's budget called for 5 cents.
I agree, you have a problem if you don't address the items that you've identified on the expense side. I agree. But I think if you,
These aren't-
if you
these
do
are-
both, if you adjust the revenue side at that 2 cent and you incorporate your expense reductions, I believe that you do better position yourself for
Okay.
FY 17.
So you're saying with the 2-cent increase in the tax
Yeah,
rate, but still cut
I guess
5 cents
I
worth.
always look at a budget of sort of a half and a half scenario. Where can I find some revenue enhancement and where can I find some expense adjustment? I mean, I think that's as simple as I can make it. And I could go down, each one of these items and probably a half a dozen others and say yes or no
Well,
pretty
I actually
plainly.
did do that, and so, and mine did cut them in 17. So, unless I see something different, then I don't know where you are. The ones for the positions, for instance, are repeatable. It's my position that we are in something of a financial pickle here, and we can't just do everything we'd like to do, and that's where we are.
Marty, we are in a financial pickle.
And I'm trying to find
Problem is that next
actual
year-
specific places for
Next
2
year,
years.
We're gonna be in a larger financial pickle, even if we do this stuff. That's,
Well, but again, I addressed half of next year's problems, and then, the new administrator will have to look at the rest of it, show up a tough time. Yeah.
And I think that 2 cents, along with the expense reductions that addresses part of 17's problems, will further address 17's problems.
If they are ones that address 17's problems, then that's good. Depends which ones we take.
Which ones are, we were talking about the position lapse, those would obviously continue on, right?
That's what I
I'm good
recommend.
with that one.
Reducing the general fund CIP.
Public
that-
Works Supervisor is one I recommended.
Right.
That would affect 17. 'cause
The
it's
general
built-
fund
it's built into the
CIP
number.
will not do that, correct? That's.
No,
those are
but
one-time
there's
things.
enough, there's enough spending in that category in 2017 that I believe we can get another 100,000 out in 2017.
The economic redevelopment contribution from the general fund, that's in all 3 scenarios, is that, that's something you could continue on, but I don't know
Well,
if that's gonna hurt our efforts.
Again, there's going to be a discussion of that later, as I understand it, or an item that impacts that. But it also impacts other things in here.
Reducing operating expenses for police and fire, I don't think that's a thing that will continue. That's gonna start affecting operations, so that's not
Well,
using the fund balance, the contribution to the retirement. So really, it's the position lapse. Those are the ones that continue on into the out years.
Well, I would argue that if you found a way of reducing overtime, it ought to continue. And to say that, boy, the amount that we pay per position and the amount that's there is not negotiable and is guaranteed, and in effect, that's what I hear. You can't change it in the amount that, already highly paid people get. I find that, but this, the police are changed a lot. The police did propose a reduction in overtime, and I think they can get at least that 50,000 next year. I would argue they should be able to get the rest of it. And if they can save fuel this year, they can save fuel next year. I don't know about the computer equipment.
And I think
I mean, somebody's got to realize this government has to lean down some. That's my opinion. I guess it's not the rest, but it's my opinion.
And I think.
See, I take exception to that.
Okay,
Because,
Kristen, I
no,
apologize.
because last
Everybody's saying
year I had this very argument with a set of even more impacting cuts in revenue exchanges, and I said no to an 11-cent tax increase. And to sit here and say that I'm all for just raising it to whatever it needs to be raised to absorb that isn't fair. It's not correct.
But I just argue this is a difficult process.
And I don't think
and-
scenario B or C reflect the fact that anybody who would look at those two scenarios, that either one of them reflect that we aren't leaning down. I mean, it's, one of them involves use of fund balance reserves that rarely, if ever, have been done for the operating budget, and the other one involves a reduction in the police and firemen retirement contribution, which, if we do that, is going to bite somebody in the rear end down the road. That's kicking the can down the road to me. And the only reason I say that is because I think these scenarios reflect substantial recognition of the leanness. And, all you have to do is look at the history of this government, and the answer has not been that we've raised taxes. I repeat again, we're talking about a tax level similar to what we had 5 years ago. And I think those are the big issues, and I think one of the big issues that we have to decide is, as big as any of them, is which way we're gonna go, is with the use of fund reserves or the combination of CIP cuts and reducing the pension contributions.
do we need to go around the table and do a thumbs up, thumbs down for each item and see where we have the consensus? I don't sense that we have that yet, and we don't have to make those decisions right now.
I can tell you right now, Mayor, I can live with either option B or C. If one of those were presented and there was two other members of this body who said they supported either one of them, my preference would be B. To me, it's a matter of which I choke on more, use of general, the balance of the reserve fund, or kicking the can down the road to another body
On the retirement
on the
contribution.
retirement fund and the CIP improvements that we would be. But, and there may be a combination of those two things that could be put together, so.
When it looks like, under scenario C, the amount in order to make that contribution to retirement, more general fund CIP projects
Have to go.
being cut.
Right.
That's the trade-off there.
Right,
as I
and
see
that's
it.
why I would prefer B personally. But,
The other thing is, in terms of what we heard you say in the lapse, the 130 is now in C too, right? For the lapse? I thought there were three of you that.
I would think so, and if that were the case, then I could see that we could make different changes in C.
That's how I understood.
That would be my,
discussion, that
that's
a
my
majority of you
understanding.
said put 130.
So then you can
So
move
just
the
to
police
keep it
and
across-
retirement.
That's absolutely
All
correct.
three
Or
columns.
you can move the,
I would favor, if we're gonna do that, then and do the 2 cents, the economic redevelopment money, but we're gonna hear something different about that, so, which may affect some of these other things, right? Right.
Well, we've got the economic redevelopment in all three.
I know you have.
Okay.
But I know you also have another proposal.
Just on the, within the budget message, separate from this whole discussion. In the budget and in the budget message, one of the things that we did with reserves was put in an option to, again, assign $500,000 from general fund balance towards the Invest Hagerstown program. We had heard a couple weeks ago, I think from Jonathan Kearns, that the Invest Hagerstown program, which was our first third in a combination of some down payment and rehab programs, had been very successful, and we have outstanding commitments. And in order to continue those programs and to receive new applicants and award those applicants money, we would need additional funding. Now, that dollar-wise, that impact is not going to be seen or reflected as an actual spend in fiscal year 16. It's just if this body would decide that that's a program that we wish to continue, and do we set aside $500,000. And again, with the Invest Hagerstown program, what happens is somebody, and we'll talk about like first thirds, somebody applies, they do the application, they get approved. We do not expend the money, and we do not move it from our general fund balance until the reimbursement is done. And that reimbursement is done after the fact. So even if we said, take
After the
another,
fact of the project being
it's completed, blessed, the reimbursements are looked through by the committee, that is not going to happen in fiscal year 16. If we decide to set aside those reserves and continue with that program and accept applicants, the money would not be expended until 17 or later.
Right, making this 100,000 more feasible, but also using some of the reserve, but using that reserve for one-time purposes. So, I understand that, but it seems to
Right.
me that makes that 100,000 very feasible.
Oh, I think.
By allowing for, in place, I'm going to have to look at it some more, but I could see that working. I guess I'll reserve a little
Sure.
bit. But that's why I wanted the rest of you to hear.
And I think with the economic redevelopment program, I think everybody took another look at that, and that everybody agrees that it's manageable, that reduction, that $100,000 reduction for fiscal year 16.
I thought that's what John said when last time he came. He said they could make that work.
Well, he didn't bring up the 500. He made adjustments
Right.
with other funds within that whole page of things.
Right.
Moving things around and estimating lower expenditures where they thought it was a combination of items. But I think with this backup, we can be assured that there's something there, as long as we can bundle it away well enough. And that's another thing I want to talk to Michelle about some more.
Mr. Alshire?
So maybe in that process, you'll take scenario C, you'll put the 125 back in, you take the 130 out, and you keep the 250 for that purpose.
I'm going to say it again, Christie.
Scenario C doesn't have the.
I know it does.
Oh,
What I'm saying is
250
to address the
yeah.
economic redevelopment, issues on the table, you account for that as an aside, as you put it, place it in a secure position of specific use. But for me, that secures police and fire retirement contributions, which I'm just not amenable to
Just so we're all
removing.
track that, Councilmember Elshire, so what you're saying is take that 125 and make it 0. in
That's correct.
column C.
And then make the 0 up at the lapse,
By adding
130,
130.
and then keep your 250 in for those economic, and I understand that that's limited in its scope, and places us to some degree in a position to have to vet which one of these, but on the economic development side. But I think it gets back to that conversation, and as John pointed out last week, or the week before, I can't remember, that it's not a matter of what, it's a matter of where. And there are half a dozen things on this
that are going to be a matter of where and not what. And some of them inevitably are going to move into future years. To make an assumption that they're not just isn't going to happen. That if we take that position, that they're going to have to happen. And as John pointed out, it's going to be based on the success of which avenues they are. And I don't think we can sit here and know that. at
So
this
you
point.
would keep the 250 in the use of fund balance reserves?
Mhm.
No,
Add that
well,
into
it does,
scenario C.
yeah, ipso facto, the 250 is part of, well,
And I just want to point out, on this sheet, this is actual spends. So when we have fund balance reserves here, that's what we're spending on the projects. That's actual dollars out the door.
Right.
Versus the separate conversation of, in addition to that, do we set aside that in a committed category and say we're gonna spend another 500 down the road
And I'm
possibly?
not
if
there,
there's-
that's why I'm
Okay.
putting that 250 there.
250.
And the other way to look at that 500 is, and chime in here, Michelle, what we heard on the housing is that Marion Council approved 30,000 a week ago for housing, right? For the housing grants. That covers the 3 that were pending.
Right,
But beyond that, the city doesn't have any more housing funds
correct.
to allocate.
And I think that 250 gives you the flexibility of addressing where, you just don't know at this point.
Well, and then the 400 is for the first third grants, where right now, all of your original 1.2 is committed. Not drawn down, because some of those projects haven't been completed, others haven't commenced. So the 1.2 hasn't been spent. But Michelle is saying, if they do all come as planned, Marion Council doesn't have any more money
And-
for the first third program.
And for me, I will just say, I am not convinced at this moment, until I see the fruition of some of those projects through FY16, to set aside additional funding of that magnitude for that purpose.
At which magnitude? The 500 or the 1 point?
The 1.2, I mean, for
Well,
me, I
it'd be
need, I.
1.2.
No,
We're-
it's
Even the
500.
500, for me, I want to be able to see, okay, here are 3 or 4 of these that are having some success, and I don't envision additional projects of that magnitude eating through that in a single fiscal year timeframe. I mean, right now, you know what I mean, as you rightly point out, that isn't all drawn down because, and for me, I want to see, I want to be able to see what value we received for that level of investment.
but the
It's-
principle is like, okay.
Right, but it's fairly easy to look at, what is it, 25, housing units that were previously unoccupied and now are occupied, and that's,
It's more immediate.
yeah, that's more immediate, that's more finite, it's more tangible versus the larger investment I think we made in some of those bigger ideas that haven't come to fruition.
But you are,
I'd be more than welcome to revisit that in FY17.
but you are okay with the fund balance for the CIP projects, I presume? In scenario C, because you had mentioned.
The 250.
Yeah.
I think that gives
No,
us the
that's-
flexibility we don't.
That's 120, that adds up to 120.
Yeah.
That's these
Yeah,
are 120.
yeah, so you would take that difference, and I think that gives us that flexibility that we're looking for.
Well, I guess I'll hold out until I look at it some more. I think I agree with the concept. I want to look at it some more and here, I'll probably have some more questions for staff, like Kristen would, on what projects and so forth, what amount for the designated reserve idea. But I think it's a good idea, and it keeps us from having to chip in the 100, the way I understand it. So that's why they're supporting it here in scenario C. And I just wanted that to be, everybody to be aware of that. Although, I'm not, at this point, I'm not ready to support any particular scenario. I guess I'll look at everything we all talked about, and I appreciate everybody's contributions.
Is that clear as mud for staff?
And I think you've got a pretty good time set aside next Tuesday for a work session.
Right.
Probably good if we could get a reasonably good sense of where you're at, because we'll have the public hearing. And I think we're getting closer. Once again, I think we're all all three of these scenarios are variations of the scenarios get you a balanced budget.
Right. Okay. Is there anything else budget-related we need to discuss tonight? or-
Well, let me just say this, I very much agree with what Marty just said.
Okay. Anyone else?
I just want to make a point on this tax issue. And I think Lou was attempting to get to this point. Whether you look at A, B, or C, when I viewed B and C, I looked at the information staff had sent, which is, what is the impact to me as an average property owner at the end of the day for the next fiscal year? And B or C, basically, if you took those, say that you're gonna take $40 out of my pocket, and you're gonna keep $40 in my pocket. In other words, the total to me as a property owner was sort of an equation of $80. And for me, I guess that's why I kind of looked at it on the revenue expense side is, where can I sort of split the process there? And for an average person of a $170,000 home, that's about what the real dollar figure is at the end of the day. And if you want to look at it even further, and Mike's back there, I don't want to pick on water and sewer, but that's about the difference in water and sewer, and we spend about 5 minutes, on that necessary sort of process of revenue and expense, and I don't see this much differently than that.
Well, we did spend a lot of time when we set the initial rate structure for, was
Yeah,
it 4
I
or
mean,
5
this time
years?
around.
Right, but we looked at that thoroughly and agreed to a certain sequence of increases, and so, and that's why we're not spending time every year on it.
All right. Anything else on the budget for now? We will be obviously talking about it next week as well and have our hearing scheduled.
Maybe just to help staff a little bit. So it's a consensus of at least a majority of you that, we got the 130 back in on C. Is it the consensus of the majority to take the 125 out? Are there three that want to do
For
that,
the
or is
retirement.
that still an item to be determined?
No, not for me.
You're saying,
I'm willing to consider that in future discussions,
okay,
but if I were voting on that right now, the answer would be no,
to
not taking it out.
not taking it out.
To fund the retirement fully.
No.
No,
No.
no, to keep it in.
Okay, keep it in as a
Keep it on
cut.
the column.
As it is
Okay,
here. I
okay.
mean, I'm concerned about the retirement, but the fact is that at some point in the future, the city is going to be doing better than it's doing now, and it will be able to make arrangements to replace that retirement, even if we can only do it at $50,000 or $100,000 a year, we're gonna be able to do that. I mean, my concern, I have lots of concerns, but one of them is, what are we gonna do next year when we're faced with probably a 10-cent tax increase next year? What are we gonna do next year? We're arguing about what to cut here. We can hardly find anything to cut here. And then next year, we're gonna be faced with tax increases at least greater than we're faced with this year potentially. What do we do next year? I think we have to address that issue before we can really move forward. I'm willing to discuss everything on here except position lapse, and I'm not willing to see that department dismantled, essentially, and that's what happens until we figure out where the money's going to come from
Nobody's
to
proposing dismantling
fund
the
that
department.
position on the basis that Marty was talking about. And I don't disagree with that basis, but I don't see, we're gonna have to pay somebody to fund that position, even if it's only acting.
Let's go back to retirement real quick. Cut retirement or leave retirement? Leave the contribution. I've heard you say you want to leave the
Betting that
contribution.
on the stock market, no way.
So you want to leave the contribution. Marty's on
It's a
cut.
very minor adjustment. A lot of places don't even make the contributions.
Right.
We're proposing just to keep it stable and level when we're in a dire situation, in my opinion.
I just think that there's other cuts that can be made. I
And I've heard, Lou, you prefer to keep the contribution.
That's my preference.
Right.
Again, I reiterate, I'm going to make sure we get a budget passed. If we have two members of this body, other than me, that can come to agreement on a budget, we'll have a budget.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to say, Dave. I'm going to keep looking at the package and different options that the staff has
Right.
worked on, and which I appreciate. And
I hear no one
some-
wants to
Listen,
commit
what-
tonight.
Yeah, what we've done tonight
Well,
is
part of it
we-
is a package. There's
Yeah.
things each of us
Right.
don't like.
Right.
Right, and that's why I say that I will be the first one on this body to say, I have preferences, but I will be happy to give up my preferences to
alternatives.
make sure that we get this done and get it done without a lot of hassle or problems. This is a very, very, I think it's probably the most difficult budget I've seen. And I say that we've had more difficult times, but those times were so difficult that you did things that you had to do and everybody understood it, and it involved people, erasing positions and doing a lot of things, but those times were so bad everybody understood it. Now we're in this, in everything I hear, Bruce, if there's one thing you've always said on your way out, and we're getting there now, is that we either have to find other revenue sources, or we're gonna have to be talking about the things we're talking about tonight, which is essentially a reorganization of the way we do business. Maybe we won't have new parks because we can't afford them. Maybe there'll be lots of things we can't do until we get to the recovery stage. But I think staff has done an excellent job, and I commend the council. What we've done tonight, essentially, I think what we've really done tonight is agree that we're gonna have a 2-cent tax increase, to the degree that we haven't had a public hearing. And when we have a public hearing, that could change things. But a more positive way to say it is we've agreed we're not having a 5-cent tax increase. Does that sound better than saying that we're probably going to have a 2-cent tax increase? But I think we've given some direction for staff of where they can look for these cuts to maximize things and try to get everybody where they're happy, or not.
I don't know if we'll achieve that, but.
Well, we learned as lawyers.
Isn't that the
a
best
good
compromise, when
settlement-
nobody's happy, right?
Good
Yeah.
settlements, when both clients go away very unhappy and the attorneys are just very joyous.
Right. Well, we will be discussing this again, so I think it would be best if we,
4 o'clock next week.
right, 4 o'clock next week.
Thank you.
What time's the public hearing?
Public hearing is at 7.
7.
The,
I will not be here for the public hearing.
okay. It'll be available on YouTube the next day. Okay.
For the exact same purpose.
Lovely. It's that time of year. We're going to skip back to item number 1 on our work session. It is National Bike Month and Bike to Work Week. And we have a distinguished member of the Hagerstown biking community here with us. Joyce Martin, would you like to come up here, please? How you doing, Joyce? Okay. You are a member of our bike task force still, correct? Right, bike advisory committee, and I'm glad you could be here with us today to accept this proclamation. It's one of my favorite months to proclaim. And I finally dusted off my bike this past weekend and took a ride on the canal, right? We got a ride coming up this weekend. Tell us more about the Bike with the Mayor. What time and where?
Okay, the Bike with the Mayor is at 9 o'clock Saturday morning. It's on the Hub City Loop, and it starts at Fairgrounds Park. And it's well planned and supported, and so everybody should
And is
enjoy
the
it.
group still doing a Saturday morning ride pretty much every Saturday at 9 a.m.? Is that still
Yes,
going
and
on?
that is now at, starting in the Long Meadow Shopping Center at the
Rooster Moon.
Rooster Moon
Rooster.
Coffee House.
All right,
Yeah,
so you can get all caffeined up and then go for a ride.
Right.
Great. Well, this is a proclamation for National Bike Month, May of 2015, and Bike to Work Week, May 11th through the 15th, 2015. Whereas millions of Americans engage in cycling because it is a viable and environmentally sound form of transportation, as well as an excellent form of physical fitness. And whereas National Bike Month and Bike to Work Week help to increase public awareness for bicycling, educate the community about the benefits of bicycling for transportation purposes, and encourages people to try bicycling as a form of commuting. And whereas there is a need to promote alternative forms of transportation such as walking and biking in order to reduce pollution, reduce America's dependence on fossil fuels, and improve the health and well-being of all people. And whereas increasing the number of bicycle lanes, paths, storage facilities, traffic calming measures will help the city ease automobile traffic congestions and encourage a healthy lifestyle for residents. Now therefore, the city of Hagerstown proclaims May as National Bike Month and Bike to Work Week, May 11th through the 15th, 2015, and encourages all citizens to participate in the city's bicycle events in May to help raise awareness and promote bicycle riding in our community. The city of Hagerstown encourages citizens to recognize the importance of sharing our streets with cyclists, encourage citizens to utilize the city's bike routes, and urges those in the community to participate in cycling activities to whatever extent possible during the month, including cycling to work. So Joyce, thank you on behalf of the City Council to all of the members of the Bicycle Advisory Committee, and our Councilmember Metzner is our liaison to that, and you guys have done a great job over the years of finding places that we can make improvements, whether it's storm drains, little things like that, the bike lanes, signage, and of course now we're on the map for the American cyclists.
Right,
as a
we are
bronze.
now a bicycle-friendly community.
Right.
That was given to us by the League of American Bicyclists, a national organization, so that's something to be very proud of.
Definitely, and I just want to give a shout out to all the staff in terms of, we have a great bicycle map. So if you haven't gotten yours yet, it's probably online. You can check it out online. And I'm sure we have some copies here on the first floor of City Hall too, available for the public. So take a bike ride. I think the Beatles had a song about that, didn't they? All right.
Thank you very much.
You're bet. We're going to get a picture. Thanks, Joyce. Do not see our Eagle Scout here yet, so we'll continue on our agenda, and when he arrives, we will recognize him. The next item on our agenda is the review of the foreign trade zone.
We're here tonight to talk about the foreign trade zone designation in the city of Hagerstown and to seek guidance whether or not to continue to maintain that designation. And the portion of land is city-owned. It's referred to as City Farm, and it has been managed and used by the wastewater division and has not been positioned or marketed for development activity. There's also long-range transportation plans that call for expansion of Southern Boulevard passing through that property area that would prohibit future development, as well as a majority of the land has a floodplain, which also restricts development. So those are key reasons why the city may choose not to continue the designation. A little bit of background on the foreign trade zone. It benefits companies that are looking to import or export goods with offering relief from tariffs and customs duties and taxes. Our foreign trade zone encompasses 7 sites throughout Washington County, one of which is this parcel in the city of Hagerstown. In addition, there is a piece of land owned by Tractor Supply that was annexed into the city in 2011, which is also a part of the foreign trade zone. There's indication that Tractor Supply would not be moving forward with the designation. There's often a consideration by private businesses whether the cost involved in the foreign trade zone activities meets the benefit, depending on the volume of export and import activity. There's a map in the packet. Also, the reason we're discussing this is that although the application for the foreign trade zone was submitted in 2002, the county is going through a cleanup and check of their compliance with guidelines and noticed that there were property owner agreements that had not been executed in 2002. So that's why we're visiting this today.
Do you have any reason to recommend we do this?
Have no reason to recommend it.
Just one question. This seems like a very unlikely place for a foreign trade zone. How did it ever get in the mix? Is there any institutional memory around that could tell us that? When you read this, it's surprising that it would ever ended up as a foreign trade zone site.
Don't have history on it.
I agree.
Okay.
I think, Dawn, the little bit I've heard about it over the years, it pops up, is split by the realigned, what would be called Southern Boulevard. Is it split or bordered? It's sort of split, isn't it?
It actually would bisect the properties of
Yeah,
the
it would
peninsula. It would
bisect it.
actually bisect it.
So
And-
there would be a new arterial bisecting it. I had not heard the thing about the sewer plant expansion
Yes, sir.
before that was in the memo.
Yes, sir.
Do we need that truly for sewer plant expansion?
As our long-range plans, with the last upgrade to the facility, we've actually taken the footprint out as far as we can go. So if new technology would occur, we have no room for expansion or growth at that point. With working with our consultants, it's actually been on the plans in the book since the 90s when Buchart and Horn was in, I believe. We would turn that facility into basically one large pumping station and containment facility, pump it up on the hill, and then use gravity to treat for whatever we would need to do facility-wise at that location.
And again, I'm just talking about the land use more than whether it's a foreign trade zone or not. It's bisected by an arterial. Is that a wise place for a sewage treatment plant? Do you need all the land going the whole way up there?
And that would be per design. I can't answer that right now. I overlaid our existing footprint on it last time. It takes up about a third of the property. Whether we would have to elongate it if the road went through, if it would bisect it on each side, I don't know at this point in time. That's a 25, 30-year plan that we were looking at just for reserve. And we do utilize it right now as our MDU-approved spoils disposal site, which is of most importance presently.
Right, right. And you may have said this while I had to step out. Are there any of these foreign trade zones actually functioning at the moment?
I'm not sure in the county, in
Well,
the
I'm
city.
talking about around the whole
Right.
county.
I would have to check that.
Because this has to go through the county. It's part of
Correct.
the deal with.
Yeah. I would add that I spoke with our regional federal representative for the foreign trade zone, and there's a shift from designating masses of land in anticipation of a company coming in and utilizing it to what they call usage-driven site designation, so that we would in the future have the opportunity to designate for a company that is ready to pursue the foreign trade zone activity. And there's a shift in the industry toward more of that spot or usage-driven designation in the future.
Seems to make
So-
a lot more sense.
So, yeah, so for instance, if someone came in and Southern Boulevard went through, it's another project that's taken forever, but if Southern, as I understand it, the part from
The bridge.
from the, above the bridge down to Frederick is going to go at any time. Is that right, Rodney? There was problems with the circle at the bottom, I think, right? Yeah. At any rate, if that ever gets carried across and it comes back out up by the auto dealers,
Yes, sir.
then we could, in theory, apply for a foreign trade zone through this process, if by some chance that's what we needed to do for an economic development prospect, rather than putting that designation now.
You all make a,
That makes more sense to me.
you all make a very convincing case. If you're asking not to retain the foreign trade zone designation, I support that. Thank you.
Any other thoughts on that?
Well, I haven't seen any. As long as we can go back and if by some reason the world changes and we need it, we can go after it then. But I can't see going through the effort for this piece of
So it's
land
not
right now.
necessarily closing any doors to future opportunities by taking this designation away from that particular parcel.
That's what I understood from the conversation with our federal rep.
So do we need to take any formal action at the regular meeting, or just simply saying we chose not to extend it or continue? Is that
Yeah,
enough?
I think that we can do that. If we were to continue it, then there would be executing an agreement. And so in light of that, I think communicating the fact that we've chosen not to is sufficient.
That's enough.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions on that topic? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is the Board of Education Academic Hub Project. I'd like to welcome Superintendent Wilcox, and if you want to bring your staff up, or are they just going to wait in the background in case you need them?
I probably need the support.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Who's this young fellow you brought with you?
Dr. Michael. I know you know. Well, first of all, let me say thank you for your patience, Mayor, Mr. Zimmerman, council members. We know this has been a project that since, the early ideation of it, has taken some time to get where we are today, but I'm really pleased to tell you that we're at a place now where I think we can begin to see the beginning of the end, if you will. As you remember, when we began talking about the hub, we were talking about the building right next to BISFA. We began with a conversation about attaching it to the Maryland Theater. We've moved from that concept to a concept that's slightly different, and that is that we can't attach to the Maryland Theater as we'd once planned. There are a number of issues right there. It's kind of an amicable divorce, if you will. The alleyway and bridging it was a costly endeavor, but also one of the things that we saw was that the theater was just not in a position to move forward with their plan yet. They didn't have the funding sources, the vision hadn't been fully developed there. And so we made a decision, which has really delayed us a little bit, to go back and re-engineer our project. And so let's talk a little bit about that. We're still talking about a project that has about 54,000 square feet if we finish off the basement portion of it. Some of that is subject to engineering and what the ground looks like. As most of you know, when we built the Barbara Ingram Center, one of the things that they ran into was some rocky surface. And of course, there's probably a reason to suspect that we'll run into it again. But we're looking at a construction cost of about $15.5 million. We're looking at a ground lease for the property of about $2 million, so about a $17.5 million project that we're looking for. As you know, that this project will serve students from the current Barbara Ingram Center, but we hope it will also serve a significant number of other students. Is the Eagle Scout here? I can stop.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
It'd be good for them to hear this.
Absolutely. We really believe that this can serve a variety of boutique programs that we're looking to create downtown. One of the things that we have already opened is our Public Service Academy at 701 North Frederick Street. We now have two really viable programs there. We have a police and fire science program. We're looking for that third leg of that program. We hope to do some things that might further expand this. Perhaps some opportunities in graphic design, web design, computer animation. We think there'll be opportunities for internships for kids downtown. We think there are great opportunities for kids in the culinary sciences, for cosmetology downtown. We absolutely think that there might even be some opportunities for kids to come down and perhaps attend classes at the technical center, but have internship programs looking at historical preservation and architecture. So we think we can create some boutique programs, and those people then would use the academic hub for some number of their academic courses. Overall, we're looking to bring about 150 young people, in addition to who we already have downtown, into this facility. I would, be remiss if I didn't say a couple of things. One is, I think we've been as open and transparent as we can with this process, but quite honestly, one of the things that I can't do today is hand you the footprint of the documents that we've received, because I don't want to shop the drawings of the developer who's approached us in this unsolicited approach. We are now going to enter into a period of time when we'll advertise, put the ed specs on the street, and if people say, we've got a better mousetrap, we're obligated to consider that. This is a 28D window that we think will launch probably on Friday of this week. We've sought some approvals. I'm going to leave you some letters and documents from, that we sent, for example, to Dr. Lowry, asking for permission to pursue this kind of alternative funding design for this program. The second thing I want to say is our funding request really has not changed, and we've talked about it in rough parameters, and I want to be very clear, we've not made a formal ask, nor has anybody said, yes, we will do it, but we've kind of proceeded along the terms because we've had some general agreement. And that is that the school board will bring at least $4 million from fund balance forward to forward fund this project. We hope that the city will consider some $1.5 million towards this project. And let me be very clear, we're not asking for $1.5 million directly in any one particular budget year. We really think that the decision of this council as to how you might want to fund that, perhaps you would say it would be $500,000 over 3 years. Perhaps you would say, you know what, we would rather not be engaged in the upfront construction money, but we would like to assume the land lease so that we own the land at the end of this 20-year period. So perhaps instead of 1.5, it was $2 million, $100,000 a year over 20 years. Perhaps you'd want to say you'd put $1 million up front. That's really a decision of this council, knowing your budgets and knowing your constituencies. But we need your participation in this, because our model then turns on this. With your 1.5 and our $4 million, we're at $5.5 million. We also believe that the county will consider shifting $4 million of CIP funding that is now dedicated to another project to our project, which will bring us to $9.5 million. And we're very hopeful that they will consider extending their bonded indebtedness. Now, I read the paper just like you do. I think that that's getting more difficult every day. But at the same time, we think we can make a compelling financial case to them that this investment of $6 million will actually pay them dividends in the long run. And let me tell you what I mean by that. If you take a look at our projections, which we've subsequently put off the table, we would have to reconsider. We were looking at building a comprehensive high school in a portion of the county. That comprehensive high school would have probably cost anywhere between $75 and $85 million. The county's contribution to that would have been anywhere between $22.5 million and $26 million with traditional state funding mechanisms in place. So no matter how you look at it, their contribution is less, but when you consider the fact that we're talking about funding this through within maintenance of effort, money that they have to give us anyway, in essence, they're getting free seats. So we think that we can paint a very compelling financial picture for them for why they should move forward with this. Again, for the city, we know you have no obligation to participate in this, but what we hope you'll believe like we believe is that this extends the mission and the vision of the city in terms of creating an arts and education entertainment district. We think we can put 150 more kids downtown on a regular basis. We think we can bring the teachers of those young people down here. We know that our kids will bring performance-oriented opportunities to the community. So we think it's a win-win for everyone. Let me share just a couple of documents with you. First, my board would have gladly been here, but they actually challenged me to begin the funding discussion. So I want to hand out a resolution that was proffered by our board that actually sets me here today. I just want you to have a copy of that so you know that I'm here legitimately. I'm not just here on somebody's whim. The second thing that I want to hand to you is a schedule that we are working on so that you have some sense of the process that we're undergoing. All of these documents, while they're not proprietary, I hope that you won't just run out and post them on a signboard. At the same time, I understand public disclosures, so let me hand these to you as well.
In other words, this is not written in stone.
This is not written in stone. Some things could change, but I think it's pretty solid work. So you have the resolution, you have the academic summary of necessary approvals, and you'll see that I've had some conversations with the county executive as well as Mr. Zimmerman. You can see that we have now sent a letter to Dr. Lever. So you can, and to State Superintendent Lowry. You can see we're starting to work off this list. Finally, I want to say to you that I have a summary that was prepared of our request for proposal. Now, the real request for proposal is a number of pages longer than this, but again, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves and have a developer say, well, wait, I'm just going to go to school on the proposal that was put together by Mr. Bowman and not really put their own pencil to paper. So this is just a draft for discussion purposes only, but it's designed to give you a sense of when we're going out and the kinds of things we might need. So, once again, I'm sensitive to the fact that you can invest in something that you haven't seen. But I will tell you, we are simply not at a place where I can lay schematics in front of you and say, this is where this room is going, this is where that room is going. I have them. We have ed specs all around them, but right now, we're preparing to enter this period where we really have to learn from others. Are there other properties? And let me tell you, I think if you saw this morning's Herald Mail, you'll know that I was contacted yesterday by a developer who wants to look at the property that is, I think, is the Masonic Temple now, right next to the Shemankel Strub. I think I'm obligated to listen to that, because if we can save our taxpayers money in this community, we should look. But quite honestly, because it's across the street once again, it does begin to interject some of the problems that we're trying to move away from, and that's having kids crossing the street, slowing traffic down, particularly that street in particular where we've been struggling with traffic issues for quite some time. That said, I'm here to answer any questions that you have. I know that you're going to have some conversations around the finance and your participation, but I'm hopeful that we can come back with a clean set of drawings, knowing exactly who our developer will be, and you'd be able to commit to the project.
My first observation is when, when your board passes a resolution, they give you a lot of homework. My second one is, I am very grateful to you for being so faithful to this project. There have been a lot of ups and downs. We don't need to rehash them, but you have stood solidly for this project the whole time, and I am grateful for that, because I think this is a very important project for the future of downtown Hagerstown. Also, we have a situation now down at the Grand Building where you and the board, your board, have made a commitment to rent space down there for one of your programs. That helped make that building successful. And that developer down there took all the necessary steps to make that building successful. That was a slum building not so long ago. And it can be done again with the kind of efforts that we're talking about, that you're talking about. And I look forward to this project moving along as fast as possible as a city councilman and a citizen of the city of Hagerstown. I can't wait to see all those kids and their parents running around downtown spending money.
Thank you.
Mr. Brubaker.
Thank you for coming in, Superintendent. I was glad to see that you mentioned the ground rent. I was aware of that as a possibility under one of the proposals that you have in hand. But I didn't see it reflected in the resolution. And that you covered it in your presentation to us by saying $17.5 million, taking the ground rent over a period of 20 years. And also, here's what I heard you say, it would help you that the city could consider funding that in lieu of the $1.5 million, and you could still make the project work. That's what I heard you say.
I believe we could.
Yeah. So that's an interesting, and I'm glad we're able to talk about it like this. And, because I was going to ask about it if you hadn't brought it up. The other thing I wanted to ask about were other costs. When we talked a year ago, and by the way, this project is an evolving project. It's not the same as it was a year ago.
Right.
Either in its terms, or it's not quite the same physically either. Last year, I believe there were some other items, parking and waivers of permit fees, I believe, as I recall from last year ago, maybe a few other things. Where are they in this equation?
Well, we're hopeful that just the relationship has evolved over time. I think the parking will resolve itself in many ways, because I've listened to this board talk this group of commissioners talked several times about the availability of parking downtown before you even need a deck. So quite honestly, from my perspective, I think that will take care of itself during the time. Obviously, you have a new city manager, but Bruce has been exceptional in helping us with event parking and things like that. So that's not as big an issue for, I think, the system as it perhaps once was. I do know I have several board members who it's a very big issue for. So at some point, we may have to.
We're aware of
formal-
that, sir.
Yeah. At some point, we may have to come back and formalize those kinds of things. The other thing I think that I can say with a degree of certainty is that, you know, we have an evolving and developing and improving relationship with the city planning department. I don't necessarily know that we need expedited permitting, but quite honestly, in this project, that's really a function of whoever the ultimate developer is, because they will be the contractor. And I think they'll get the service that, you know, the city would give to anyone.
Thanks.
Well, I think, I've said it before, but I think this is a great investment. I think the city should, or it's, not that we should participate, but I think it's a good thing to participate in, not only for all the reasons that you suggested, but, you know, when we think about the big picture and the opportunities that this will create for children and families, I mean, that's what I see as the future of education, is choice. And when we look at what helps, you know, we've all been focused on how can we keep our values, property values up? How can we keep our assessable base up? An investment like this in our own community, it's not just a school. I mean, these are opportunities, not just for kids from Hagerstown, but from Washington County all over. And when people are looking for a place to live, they're looking for schools, special programs like this that their children will have opportunities to participate in. And if they can live as close to the school as they can be, then that will help us in achieving our goals of bringing in, you know, new and different demographics to our residential communities. That, you know, people may, in fact, move to Center City, Hagerstown, just because there are these kinds of educational opportunities here. So I hope the council will consider this request, and that we can find a way to be a partner in this project, because I do think it's a worthwhile investment in our community.
Even more important than the 85 million is save is the rivalry that you secure between North and South. But when I had an opportunity to speak to kids about some urban planning issues in the Clear Spring High School last week or the week before, and, you know, I start off with a picture that I took, or my wife took, of us downtown a few weeks ago, and, you know, everybody I showed to was like, they don't know where that's at. It was at University Park. But it doesn't look like sort of what you see sometimes when you drive through it at 40 miles an hour. But I could just tell when you say this is downtown Hagerstown, and you see the looks of the kids from Clear Spring on their faces, and you can see that there is this preconceived, ingrained notion of perception of what that is. And I think that in every one of these educational opportunities, whether it's you guys or the university or you know, the Patterson for you know, the residential dorms. What that does is say to me that what you're asking is us to contribute 10% to a project that changes the perception of a generation. So I think that is probably the most important sort of intangible measurement that you will conclude from an effort like this. And I think I said it even 2 years ago when the stadium was the discussion at the time. 10 years prior to that discussion, we spent a lion's share of our city, county, and Board of Ed funds on CIP projects to invest in educational opportunity and expansion downtown. And we should remain on that course. And rightly so. And for me, I realize that you have an obligation. And it's funny, you probably have the same sort of scenarios as we do, where, you know, nobody really wants to jump on an idea for a building downtown until the public's at the door spending the money on it. I look at the Holiday Motel that sat empty, and as soon as we got it for 27,000 or whatever it was, everybody in the room had an idea what to do with it, and so did we. So I understand that you have to go through this process of fairness, but I think that we as governmental bodies, especially the city of Hagerstown, have waited far too long on so many projects, on members of the development community, frankly, at times, to acquiesce to this idea of fairness on the projects that we take on. And for me, when I read the article, as other folks did today, the Masonic Temple, and if it is some nature of change, constructive change to that building, it wouldn't sell right for me. It isn't a building I look at downtown and say, I can't wait till somebody changes that. We look at that building every time we're downtown, and that's not somewhere that I envision such significant change to happen. I look at that building next to the Maryland Theater and between BISFA and say, yeah, that's a building ripe for ripe for some change. So.
I think it's also a good opportunity when the project moves forward, to look at some other things, how the School for the Arts, the Academic Hub, and the Maryland Theater all contribute to the pedestrian and vehicular traffic in downtown. In other words, whether it's in the front on Potomac Street or in the back, there are ways that we could probably enhance the flow of traffic and pedestrians that will be beneficial to everybody that's coming to visit these facilities. So.
Well, I think, the other thing that I wanted to say before the other council members have an opportunity is, one of the things that we've done is we've really thought hard about what the mix of kids might look like. And we really do want to have not just those kind of high flyers, but we want to have some of the kids who are working in vocations, some of the trade programs. We want to have our police and fire kids engaged in this process in downtown, so that we really start to promote a community. And that's part of this board's mission, is creating a community. So this is just an artist's sketch that we've had of it, but we really want to bring a mix of kids downtown.
Well, I applaud the visionary majority of the Board of Education. I know Dr. Hardings came in, so thank him for being here. But I really do appreciate their bold vision, really. I mean, it's a pretty bold statement to move forward on a project like this. And again, I think if we're willing to invest in ourselves, meaning the city and the county and the Board of Education, in a facility like this, it tells the whole world that we're willing to invest in ourselves, and so we're welcoming that kind of investment to our community as well. And I think it becomes a win-win. I've always said, the more we invest in education, it really is an investment in economic development, whether it's to meet workforce needs through some of those vocational programs or college prep needs. It's still going to be enhancing our economic development potential.
At least we forget, Hagerstown has already taken this mayor and this council has already taken a long step toward trying to help this project happen, in that the building on Antietam Street, which is hopefully torn down by today.
It's already down.
So I know it is. I ride past it twice a day. And we part of what we did, in fact, that was my total motivation, was to make sure you all would have a staging area for the School for the Arts building.
Thank you.
And I just want to say this. I don't know anything other than what I read in the newspaper about the other proposal that you mentioned a few minutes ago. But I don't like that. Personally, I'm just speaking now for myself. I don't like that proposal. I think that it just creates some of the problems that exist now in those kids having to cross streets to go to different buildings. We have to have police over there. We have to pay police to be over there and to make sure that they're safe. And I don't, if the buildings, the existing building and the new building are essentially right beside one another, that sort of thing isn't going to have to be necessary. So
I used to joke with my friend Aaron, who's a math teacher at Barber Ingram, that she was, when I came back into town after coming home from school myself, and I saw her out there with the stop sign in the middle of the road, I said, Aaron, you're probably the highest paid crossing guard in Washington County.
Actually, Mr. Habermill is.
Okay, there you go. Now he is, yeah.
I would say that, first, if I presented it as a proposal, that I misspoke, because what it is a developer who has said, have you looked at this building yet? You know it's for sale. And again, I think I'm obligated as the superintendent to look at those. Somebody else sent up the MRS listings for the building that Greater Hagerstown is in to me. Apparently that's for sale as well. But quite honestly, I think the site that we've identified is a great site, and it really makes a lot of sense for us for a number of reasons, not just those that you mentioned, Senator. So.
This council, mayor, and council have made a lot of progress in downtown Hagerstown. It's obvious and it's palpable, and thank you for being a partner in that.
Thank you all, and I hope that we can bring you something that you can really get your teeth around. But it's, at some point, we're gonna need something really concrete around the contribution. One of the things that I hope is that you'll help us be leaders as we approach the county, because our ask will not change for them. So I think you can rest assured that that's what we're going to do, but it would really be helpful to us to go in and say, we have two partners on board. So, thank you.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I just want to clarify, because last week I mentioned in last year's budget and then in this year's budget, we've had in the CIP a downtown project, quote unquote, in the amount of 1.5 million. But I think with what you described here today and getting to Mr. Brubaker's point, it doesn't necessarily have to be a CIP expense. It can come in any of those different forms, which we can consider in the next couple weeks as we finalize our budget.
And for me, and I think for our finance team, knowing how you plan to participate sooner rather than later.
Sure. By the end of
we would
May,
have to find a
I think
way
you'll be
to-
able to know.
Okay, we would have to find a way to make up the difference in the first few years of construction, probably through fund balance and how we would accumulate that. Or we'd have to change the ask to the county.
As just one council member, for me, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of how.
Okay, thank you.
Just right. It's a good way to put it.
Thank you.
Thank you very
appreciate your
much.
time. Thank you very much.
And now we will recognize our Eagle Scout, Daniel Holmes. Would you come forward, please? Nice to meet you, Daniel. You want to turn to the audience here? And first of all, tell us who your dad is.
Anthony.
Well, that's not how most people know him. If you've ever been to a Suns game, right, I know I'm probably embarrassing you now, right? Because kids are always embarrassed by their parents. But everyone would know your dad is Big Tony out at the Hagerstown Suns games. So we appreciate him bringing you here today, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here to recognize your accomplishment as an Eagle Scout. First, tell us what troop you're in.
75.
Troop 75, and tell us a little bit about your project, your Eagle Scout project.
Well, somebody at the rec's mom died, the lady who runs the rec, so I decided to make a bench for her mom.
Very nice. So sort of a memorial to her. Excellent. Well, and I see you brought members of your troop here today, and we thank you all for being here. I do have a certificate of special recognition for you on behalf of the city of Hagerstown. I do hereby wish to extend our sincere congratulations to Daniel Holmes in recognition of the achievement of the rank of Eagle Scout. You are commended for your hard work and dedication in reaching this milestone. We encourage you to continue to set new goals and strive to realize them. As you celebrate this accomplishment with family and friends, please accept our congratulations and very best wishes. Everybody, please hold on 1 second. And when you get all dressed up, even though I don't have mine on today, you can put this on your lapel. This is a city pin. All right, thank you so much. You want to take a picture?
Yeah, let's get some pictures.
Yeah, come on, take a picture. You want to come and say a few words? Big Tony, come on up. Someone asked if you were going to be blowing your horn today. I said, no, you're just going to be tooting your own horn,
That's right. But he could toot his first. It's his moment.
I don't got much to say.
He don't have much to say. He say more at home than he do here.
Yeah?
Yes.
Would you like to say a few words?
Yeah. Our troop has been in existence, this is our second year, okay? No, wait a minute, hold on, you ain't heard the good thing. Our very first Eagle Scout is sitting over there, Ryan Johnston, if he would stand up. And our next in line Eagle Scout who's about to start working on his project is Sammy Clip. And the one that helps to keep this going is my brother, Scott Johnston, who is also our Scout chaplain. Stand up, brother. We look alike? We twins. And I still brought a couple of my leaders with me, and the man that's sitting beside Scott, he's the one that makes sure that we get all the resources and all that stuff we need. He's our district executive, my brother there, Don.
Thank you for being here.
And not only do me and Scott run Troop 75, we also run PAC 75, PAC 316. PAC 75 is out of the Bob Johnson Community Center. They'll call me the recruiting machine. That's why I'm sitting up here with these in my hand. I'm gonna make sure all of y'all get one of these. It's got my phone number on the back. If you want to tell your little children they want to come out for scouting, we take them first grade till they graduate high school. And after they graduate high school, we'll still keep them. We'll make them leaders like Miss Lisa over there, if you would stand up. Brittany beside her, Miss Katrina, and the grandma of scouting, we call her grandma right there. That's only a couple of our leaders. But we service over 150 boys per week, okay? And my brother, the mayor, I want to thank you for inviting us out here.
My pleasure.
And we want to thank y'all for listening to us, but I won't leave without y'all having some of these.
That's great. Well, thank you for all the work that you're doing. Keep up the great work.
Land on.
It would be a grandson in my case.
Say it again.
It would be grandson in my case.
You can bring them.
They're all too old already.
Hey, we take all the leadership we can get. We take them old and young, men and women, aunts and uncles, grandmas and grandpas. What's up, Brother Luke? How you doing? Here you go. Can I leave some of these with you? Y'all can leave them here?
Sure, thank you.
By all means, give us a call.
Appreciate it. Feel free to stick around for the last couple items on our agenda. Don't feel obligated, though.
Yeah, you know.
Okay. Yeah, the next item is Land Management Code amendments, so I'm going to welcome the planning staff to the table.
It's a hard act to follow.
I know.
Land management code. All right, we're back to review conversations that began on March 24th. At that meeting, as you recall, staff gave a presentation on the Planning Commission's recommended package of amendments, as well as highlighted 5 items that had not been supported by the commission that had been recommended by the staff. And then the memo goes on to outline what seemed to have been a consensus among the council at the last meeting to support 3 items that were discussed. One, the written decision proposal for the Board of Zoning Appeals. And I should note that the city attorney has again reiterated with me that he does not support this idea of staff or the city attorney writing the decisions. Some version of the storefront protection zone proposal and the Historic District Commission hardship provision, however, there would need to develop the criteria for the bona fide economic development opportunity. And I also outlined the input that we received from Councilman Alshire at the meeting, the 8 items there. Explain the material that had been emailed to you since that meeting to give you more background on what the Planning Commission considered over the 9 months of their review, including all of the minutes from those deliberations. And then just outline the next steps, that if you so desire to add any of the items the Commission did not recommend, it should go in the package before the hearing so the public has a chance to comment on the entire package. If you want to come up with some new items that have not been considered by the Commission, it would be appropriate to remand it back to the Commission, those items for them to consider and make a recommendation to you. And then depending on what results from this meeting today, we'll confer with the city attorney of what the next steps would be, whether you want another meeting to discuss things or whether we should get ready to schedule a hearing in June. But we figured we were here to hear from you today.
So on item Well, I guess I'm just, item number 3, the provision to require enclosures around all dumpsters added to existing development. You're saying that that one is still not in the running for consideration? If I
thought
read
we
this
already
memo
did
correctly.
that. We don't require those?
We require them when a site plan comes in. If somebody proposes a site for development, that is a standard that we would have. What we find is that there are occasionally businesses that exist, the buildings have been there 5, 10, 20, 50, 70 years, and they decide they have a need for a dumpster. The dumpster just gets dropped on the property, and that's the end of the story. The proposal that we put forward to the planning commission is that all new dumpsters, even if it's not a place that requires a site plan for that particular development, would have to have a dumpster enclosure.
How would you know when those things happen?
Basically, on a complaint or an as-noticed basis.
What, that a
because-
new dumpster's dump, or dropped?
Yes.
I mean, I can think of at least 2 that I've seen walking in the last 2 months.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no way of proactively getting ahead of it. It's gonna be a situation where when we notice them, we'll have to tell them, we can do some public education, but there's no permitting for a dumpster that triggers some sort of review.
To me, I think you need to do 2 things. I think you need to define dumpster to address issues where folks are using things other than dumpsters as dumpsters.
You mean like a
Like a
trailer?
And I think that, and I know you guys saw the pictures I sent of a number of commercial establishments that currently use our, when I say our, I mean the city's residential-oriented trash and recycling collection that I don't think all are appropriate to use, and I think that's going to increase the requisite number of dumpsters that are going to be required in some instances. So I think that they need to be in an enclosure.
What did get moved forward from the planning commission was that all new dumpsters that are substantially visible from a public way would be required.
Well, I know that you saw the pictures we got of the one over on Washington, I guess it was, where, just because it's not in sight of cars passing on the street doesn't mean it's not a negative impact to the rear of many of the properties in downtown where, alleys function as streets. So,
But that would count as a public right-of-way, I'm assuming, an alley.
Let me pick this. I agree with Kristen on that. I mean, that position makes sense. I'm also not happy with the Planning Commission's storefront protection zone decision, nor their windows graphics decision, or their hookah lounge decision. And I don't think those items should be omitted. I think they should be within the land management code. The storefront protection zone, I'd be willing to do that for a 3-year basis, and it would sunset after 3 years. If it's sunset, we'd have to come back and review it, and if it weren't working, we could get rid of it. But I am really particularly upset by the fact that the Planning Commission did not approve of the window graphics proposal here. When you go to the parking deck on North Potomac Street, the first building on the right has windows that are all painted up, and it really doesn't look nice in my view. You go down on Franklin Street, and I think you pointed this out, Kathy. There's one building down there that has 2 buildings, actually, they're side by side, that have nothing but pictures on the walls. In this case, of women with different wigs or hairdos or something. And it's really pretty disgusting looking. And if you go a little further down Franklin Street, the same thing exists. I really think that this is an important thing that should be included in the land management code. And frankly, the harder it is to open up a hookah lounge, the better, as far as I'm concerned. And I think this language made it a little more difficult, or at least put it in a position where it doesn't embarrass our city from time to time, like the one did on the corner over across the street here. So I really think that, I mean, my personal feeling is that these things should be included. I'm sorry, I mean, I'm sure that the Planning Commission gave this a lot of thought, a lot of time, a lot of energy, but, you know, I feel like as an elected official that I'm better representing my constituency throughout the city by saying what I'm saying now.
Well, and I agree with the storefront protection zone, because if you look at why those buildings were built the way they were, to have big windows on the first floor, it was so that pedestrian traffic would be able to actually see in the window and see what's going on in there. I mean, that was the whole purpose. So it seems to me, if you're gonna have a storefront church that doesn't generate traffic but only a couple days a week, and they put curtains up and close the whole thing in, or if you have office buildings where you're not really generating retail pedestrian traffic, or any number of these things, including those window things that basically cover, it defeats the purpose of the central business district. And I think that's the ultimate goal of these, the storefront protection zone, is to keep as much of the integrity of the central business district as possible, and to keep, I guess you could call them degenerative uses away, where you're not going to have higher pedestrian activity or retail or other kinds of high-traffic activities, correct? I mean, that's, the idea is to, and it goes to what I complained about when I was on the Planning Commission for 5.5 years, which was, we're really good about saying what we don't want. We don't want hookah lounges, we don't want tattoo parlors, we don't want dirty bookstores, but we're not very good about saying what we do want. And I think that's what the storefront protection zone really does, is say, here's a list of things we do think are appropriate for the central business district in downtown. And so here's what we welcome in these particular, in this particular zone.
The sunset idea is an interesting idea, because we don't really foresee that we would need a storefront protection zone for forever, but certainly where we are today, we would need it. As the downtown storefronts fill up with retail and restaurants, and we get to be more vibrant like that, then we probably wouldn't need it. So it's an interesting idea to have a sunset revisited,
Right.
to see whether we need to continue it or if we don't need it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these things that don't fall under the storefront, appropriate storefront uses, are there only because the landlord will just take anything they can get for rent, because there isn't that demand for perhaps those other services. So I would agree, I think the sunset provision is an interesting one. Any other thoughts on that?
Well,
I know you've participated in all the discussions,
yes,
council
I did.
member.
Very. And Jen and I supported the staff's recommendations. I tried to find compromises, but I think the baby went out with the bathwater a bit. Everybody worked hard and earnestly at it. And I think at the March 24th session, I tried to explain what as best I understood, the majority of the Planning Commission's viewpoint. So I won't go through that again. But it was just generally anything you do to raise possible obstacles to somebody setting up business is something we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, but if it's not a business, that's the whole point. I mean,
Well,
storefront church is not business. It
No,
doesn't
no,
create
no.
a whole lot of
Right.
pedestrian
Anybody-
traffic.
Well, that has to do with the use of the building, that somebody might want to remodel a building, and they needed the first floor for that use of office, and this would prevent that. And I think here we need to balance that we don't want that blocking off the street either. There's attempts to find out how that might be made to work. Kathy worked hard on, well, here's the minimum a storefront would have to be, that sort of thing.
Oh, so you could have office
So you
behind
could-
a certain
yeah,
amount of
so there
feet
could be-
in, right?
That there were a lot of issues, everybody could find a place that didn't work. And so therefore, the whole thing
Right.
went out. So I think we should, well, I'll let somebody else make the motion, but I generally support the staff proposals. At least they should go to public hearing, and if we want to fine tune them, we have that opportunity after the public hearing.
Well, let's take, I mean, we can go
But,
each of these,
But I did want people to understand,
Points
the
here.
planning commission worked hard on it, and it was basically people thought it would interfere, or those that thought it would interfere carried the day.
But you want to know if you want to put these in for the public hearing. So what I'm, in terms of, let's just go through these first 5 points here from the first and second pages. The storefront protection zone, is there any interest in keeping that in for the public hearing? I heard at least one council member say yes. Mr. Alshar, yes, yeah, okay. So we want to include that for the public hearing.
Right.
The window graphics, any desire to keep that in there for public hearing?
I do.
Okay. It's 2, yes, okay. Dumpster enclosures?
I do.
Yes,
Right.
okay. Got majority there, consensus. The provision to prohibit hookah lounges, should we,
In the downtown.
in the downtown?
I had this listed as, which is why I said discuss staff's proposal in more detail, because, you know, I've certainly had opportunity to walk by both. When I say both, I mean you have one up here on this portion of Potomac and one in South Potomac, and they have clearly in their iterations operated differently. You know, just different structure of crowd, different, you know, influx and you know, flow of business. It's just, you know, perception that I have, and so it's hard for me to say no to something altogether when, you know, any type of use can be managed in a responsible manner and function, and I will tell you, I've you know, I've seen that create some pretty normal, you know, younger pedestrian traffic, and you know, I'm certainly not going to judge the decision of any individual to participate in any specific business, but I guess I've seen both of these examples operate in a manner where, you know, if appropriately policed, are removed for due cause, rather than, you know, excluded with the assumption that you're not going to be able to appropriately police them.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said the management is the key.
Yeah,
I mean, in the one case, you have the one that still exists. I mean, first of all, the person who owns the hookah lounge owns the building. It's more a cultural thing instead of a, I don't
There's
know.
clearly a difference in operational
Right.
and management style
Right.
between the two that I've seen,
And there were obviously other illegal activities going on at the one that was shut down by the police because of those things. So I mean, I hear what you're saying in terms of you can't lump all of them into the same category just because, you know.
But all we're
There's a
deciding tonight is
perception.
whether to include it in the public hearing.
No, no, I
We can
understand. I'm just trying to
fine-tune
clarify.
it, if we want afterwards. We have that right.
Right.
Once we've held the public hearing.
The planning commission.
Which we worked hard for in the General Assembly to confirm, by the way.
The planning commission took it out because they felt that it was a legitimate new type of business, similar to a bar, but they felt that if the city thought that there were operational problems that we had experienced with that one, that it would be more appropriate, rather than banning them downtown, to develop an additional city code outside of the zoning that regulated hours of operation or whatever the other issues are that we would be concerned about.
And there are other jurisdictions in the state of Maryland that have done so.
So I know there's one council member who's interested in keeping the provision to prohibit the hookah lounges to go to public hearing. Are there any other?
Well, could I make one more point?
Please.
I think that in general, hookah lounges have a negative reputation. I think when people think about hookah lounges, and I know that this is true from the people that I talk to, they think about places that sell drugs. Now, I know that that's not going on down South Potomac Street, but I think that the general perception of hookah lounges is that. And I don't think that helps the perception of Hagerstown at all. Kathy, perhaps the answer is what you just suggested a few moments ago, to have a separate ordinance to the extent that we can on hookah lounges, but
And you can do things like limit how close in proximity they are and those kinds of things. Hours of operation.
And if that's what you're suggesting, I wouldn't have a problem with that, but
In which case, we would not need to
Well,
take this to public hearing.
unless, I mean, it gives us a chance to discuss it. If we take this out, then we would need to bring up a whole new provision or bring it up separately. Whereas if we want to work something in, we don't have to approve this exact prohibition. It just means we're taking it to public hearing.
Right.
So.
That's all we're
we can-
deciding right now.
But if we take it out, then we've taken, seems to me, maybe I'm wrong, we've taken the subject out of the discussion. And I think we ought to resolve where we
Keep it in
wanna
there
go
for
on it.
public hearing.
Yeah.
It's just there's limitations on what the zoning ordinance can do for operational issues. We can have regulations about separation from other uses, but can't really get into hours of operation and things like that
Right,
with
but we
zoning.
could say, here's as far as we want to go
Mm-hmm.
zoning ordinance, here's where we want you to come back with other ordinances.
So it sounds, and, go ahead.
And just so we're clear, we understand, we're talking about, the disagreement was their presence in the downtown, the CCMU zoning district. The proposal does list them as a permitted use in the CG and the CR zoning district, which are the former C2 and C4, our shopping center, Spine Road, commercial districts. And also, it is written in such a way where it says located at least 500 feet from any existing tobacco store or vapor or hookah lounge. So some of that about the distance issues are actually within the proposal as we speak, so.
Just
But
narrows
as,
it down.
But it sounds like we want to keep it in for the public hearing.
That's what I would say, and then we can, we don't
Still
have,
decide
I
after
don't
that.
necessarily agree with the total prohibition, but I think we ought to have,
Right.
since that was the staff proposal.
Sure,
I think
I'm okay with
we
that.
can do that and not be obligated.
And then the written decisions by the BZA, also, we want to take that to public hearing as well?
Don't?
I do, yeah. Okay, so looks like we want to take all 5 of these things, keep them in there for the public hearing.
And then a question I have for you on the storefront protection zone. Do you want it to be the version that went to the planning commission's hearing, or the revised version we created trying to gain planning commission support, which is we shrunk the area down a bit to be a more concentrated area, and we also revised the definition of storefront so that it would only apply to a space where you entered the storefront from the sidewalk, not spaces where you enter through a spine corridor and branch off. Because there are some spaces downtown that they have windows, but they don't have doors. You go through a shared door and then you access space.
building next door is a perfect example of that.
What I would recommend, again, since the compromise failed at the planning commission, is take the stricter one and
The
then.
original.
If we, but ask for copies of the others in our work session and considerations, and if we think it's too restrictive, we can loosen it up.
I'd agree with that.
Whereas if you take the liberal one, it's
Right.
harder to tighten.
Sure,
Because people
sure.
say, well, we didn't know you were gonna do that.
No, I think that's a good idea.
So the version that went to hearing.
The stricter version,
Oh,
the original
The
staff
original
version, I think that was a tighter version, wasn't
Yes.
it? Yeah,
Okay,
because the planning commission didn't accept the compromise version, so.
right. Not a majority.
But we can look at it, maybe we want to, I'm not saying I automatically support the total staff provision, but I think we take it to public hearing, and then we can decide where we want to go with it.
Okay.
Kathy, you want to mention when you'd like to hold the public hearing?
There would be enough time to do it this month at this point, if you were finished with your deliberations today. If you wanted to discuss it further, then we'd have the hearing at the end of June. Because we need to advertise twice, 2 weeks in advance and 1 week in advance.
So you're saying on the 26th would be the soonest. It's also the night of budget adoption and the tax rate
Yeah, that's
ordinance.
gonna
So
be
does, if that makes a difference to the mayor and council,
June would be fine.
Why don't we wait till June? I think that's better.
And I didn't know if you wanted to discuss the issues that Councilman Alshire brought up at the meeting, these 8 items on page 2.
Two that I do, looks like most of the rest are resolved. 6 is resolved, 5 is resolved. And I think 1 is, well, generally resolved. But numbers 2 and 4, the 1 is the plan unit development. this idea that you can suspend a plan indefinitely as appeals continue on, to me, I think flies in the face of the very notion of approving plans with a certain timeframe. And
That
for
was-
me, 3 years is
That
more
was
than enough.
brought to our attention by the local land engineering community as far as the processing of plans. It takes a while to get plans through a process. So if we have a 2-year window for PUDs and an appeal, just one level of appeal takes over 6 months to complete, it puts, assuming that appeals don't completely drag out, it puts them under a major onus to get moving real fast after the appeals work their way out. And if somebody chooses to belabor the process and go through multiple layers of appeal in theory, you could have your plan expire before your appeals are completed.
I understand that. Yeah,
Have we had one successful PUD yet? That actually didn't, that didn't come in
Yeah.
for like a revision and, because it seems like, I'm sorry, go ahead and answer the question.
Hager's Crossing is a planned unit development.
Okay, but where's the commercial component to that?
It does not have a commercial component because it joins a commercial component.
Right, but I mean, to me, that's not a successful PUD, I'm sorry, but I mean, the whole point,
Oh, you mean, do we have one with commercial? No.
right. Because that, I mean, isn't that the whole point of a planned unit development, is you have higher density residential,
Mixing
open
of-
space,
Mixing of residential types
Right,
and then
with
a
some-
commercial component.
right. And the one, there was one off, where the Brook Meadow is, that was way over 2 years ago, I know.
That was a
came along.
proposal that never went to final, never finalized.
Security there?
Yes, but that never,
That died, didn't it?
yeah.
Yeah. So I was hoping we can get some parkland out of that.
But there's,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't even know why we have PUDs, to be honest with you. I don't-
They're difficult to implement in small urban areas such as Hagerstown. Not impossible, and it's good to have them in the ordinance in case an opportunity comes up. But your typical more successful PUDs are much larger tracts of land, typically
Farther away from an urban
farther away
center.
from the middle of an urban setting. Not necessarily saying inside or outside of a municipality per se, but
Right.
just much more flexibility with larger tracts of land.
Right,
And because there's a public hearing component, the commercial part often gets dropped by the developer in an effort to gain support for their plan.
Right.
Because generally, the
I think
neighbors
we came,
don't want the
there's
commercial
an example in the
traffic.
county like that, right?
Like Greenwich Park was gonna be a PUD with a commercial component, and then the county development around it was very agitated about that.
Right.
So they dropped the commercial part and they dropped the PUD.
Right,
It became just a straight development.
right.
The other item is number 4, the fence issue. The modification proposed for higher residential fence height. I still believe that well, I'm much more liberal than even this definition. If somebody buys a house on, I don't care, give me a street, Prospect,
Okay.
and they want to put up a fence behind their home to entertain privacy of their backyard, I don't have any hesitation to allow that 8 feet, 10 feet, 12 feet. It really doesn't matter to me. If what they're trying to do is preserve the enjoyment of their property, then.
Next to an industrial or commercial.
Yeah, I mean,
use.
You're
yeah.
talking, you're right, that's the clarification I want, only next to a.
And to me, I don't even care about that.
Well,
I just don't.
I do, I care if there's a 12-foot fence
Well.
my neighbor puts up. I care very much.
I'd be like Robert Frost, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and
I
whom I'd
would
like to
care.
give a fence.
Yeah. I don't have a huge yard like you do.
I just don't get the idea that you can't.
Well,
I don't know.
there's connections between, or I should say differentiations between fences and other buildings. For example, we allow, or the ordinance allows a fence in a residential district in somebody's rear yard up to 6 feet in height in order to provide privacy. If you have a building such as a shed or a garage, which may be 8 or 10 feet tall or 12, or they can actually, I think, go up to 15, then there's a requirement that there be a setback. But if we're going to allow a fence to be 10 or 12 feet tall, right up to the property line, why not a shed or something like that, or a garage? There are provisions in the ordinance that one of the goals of the ordinance is to allow for maximum light, air, breathability space. If you live in a neighborhood where you have relatively small yards and all of your neighbors have a 10 or 12-foot fence, your backyard looks like a prison pen at that point.
But I can, and haven't we entertained something along these lines, allow for a higher fence next to commercial, industrial uses and so forth?
It was sparked by
The cement plant.
the cement
The
plant.
cement plant in South End.
They're industrially zoned, so they're allowed to have an 8-foot fence. They were offering to pay for fences for their residential neighbors because of the concern about the new equipment that was going out there. Their neighbors couldn't do an 8-foot fence. So the one that we saw at the planning commission, the concrete plant was gonna put the 8-foot fence up on their property or on the property line so that the residential people could have that tall, but they themselves could not put up a fence that tall because they were residentially zoned. And
But
so
that's
what
something along
sparked
the
this change.
line of what Kristen's talking about,
Or the
that
one-
I'd like to see a proposal for.
600
We should-
block
we
of
should
north.
start.
Well, it's in the
Okay.
packet, it's part of the packet. It does allow for it to go up to 8 or 10 feet tall if you're adjacent to the commercial or
district.
industrial
Right.
district.
And I don't
zoning.
agree with the term district. I think it should be non-residential uses.
For like, so you'd be protected from a non-conforming
From a
use.
grandfather
Yeah,
use.
you're gonna have
Which I
those
think is a
issues,
reasonable,
you know.
it's how do you define it, but I think that's a reasonable.
600 block of North Potomac is probably
Yeah,
a good
it's
example of that.
reasonable.
Okay.
But could we go ahead with the hearing and bring that up as a subject? Would you be, okay, I think it's a great point.
Yeah, however you wanna bring it up.
I'm okay with it. I think it makes sense to look at the use, not necessarily.
Yeah, I think the use idea is good.
It's a case-by-case kind of a thing.
So do you want to go to hearings saying district or use?
I would support use.
Use.
If you're talking use, there may be uses that are permitted in residential zoning districts, such as churches, schools.
I think
Is
if
that
you
part
want
of
an
the
8-foot
intent?
fence between you and a church or a school, you know, I guess, a good example is the ABC school out on, whatever street that is, Locust.
I'm not as against that as I would be, the residential one I can see, but I can see, but at least put it in, and we can talk about it.
What about number 3 on your list?
I don't know what it was.
Supporting allowing non-city residents HCC
Oh.
if they have some connection to or stake
I
in
wasn't
the
gonna bring
city.
that up. I
Okay.
figured that would get Penny riled up, so I left that one.
Penny's docile.
Good idea.
So I'll scratch
But I'm
that.
sure that Penny and I are both in agreement on it.
Okay. Did we cover all of them?
Do any of those need to go back to the planning commission, Kathy, under what you outlined in your memo?
I don't think number 4 is, we can ask Mark Boyd, but I don't think number 4 is enough of a change to warrant a remand, but we can check with the city attorney. The idea of going from non-residential districts to non-residential uses. But we have some planning commission meetings in between now and the end of June. We could bring that up with them.
I'm not proposing it, I was just trying to clarify so council is aware if you did put something back on their agenda.
I wouldn't object to having the input. Would anybody else? I mean, again, all they can do is say,
So far, the only thing on here.
as long as they don't have, it's taking it back for consideration and a recommendation and not a full public hearing process. Because we don't want to delay this process for that reconsideration.
So it looks like it would be number 4 on Councilman Alshar's list that we would take back to the commission, because the commission has already weighed in
On the others.
on the others.
And
What
most of
about
the
the
stuff
po-
on there is other.
What
You
about-
already got in the 5 item.
What about plan unit development? What was the consensus there? Leave it as it is and see what happens at the hearing and discuss it?
Can you, what is the
Apparently we don't
latest?
have-
Can you review?
That was to extend the period. Right now, if you don't start construction on your plan unit development after, is it 2 years?
2
Steve?
years.
I believe it's 2 years, yeah.
Then you lose it and it goes back to what
Okay.
the base zoning was, because PUDs are an overlay.
Right.
You just lose the overlay. as a request of the Land Use Council, they asked us to consider extending it from 2 to 3 years. And then the other part was allowing the clock not to start ticking until after an appeal period, any appeals that were out there concluded. And
So the
that-
question is whether or not we want to let that go to the hearing.
Whether you're comfortable with keeping it open-ended
So then
for
that's
appeals.
2 years that it's good, 18 months in, you file an appeal, you get to appeal for 3 years, and now you're 5 years into, you know what I mean, the process. And the plans, basically the plans from 5 years ago are still good. And I guess that's where
And if you were to take it to hearing as you deliberate it, you can keep in mind as well that what you're dealing with is two separate items embedded within one phrase. Because you're going from 2 to 3 and it doesn't start until the appeals. Maybe you may find that you are okay with one but not the other and modify it
Well,
accordingly.
the way I read this, Kristen, I mean, if this is accurate, you would favor 3 years if we restricted the appeals thing in some way,
within that time frame.
within the whole time frame.
That's right.
Well, I don't have a problem with letting it go to hearing, and we can always come back to it based on the feedback that we get. Did we cover everything?
Everything in this memo, I don't know if there are any other items that anyone wanted to discuss that were
Could
not
you
covered.
fill us in on the hearing this Friday on the Court Park appeal for the benefit of everybody listening at home?
Right,
or-
the planning commission last year reviewed a proposal by the owner to modify the existing buildings to wind up with 72 additional units in the existing buildings. They needed to do a concept plan as the beginning stage for a site plan. And so they went to planning commission in July. Planning commission was not satisfied with their concept plan and denied it. Came back in October, and again, and they made some changes, and they went back to planning commission. Planning commission again decided that they could not accept that concept plan, and so it stopped there. And then the owner appealed. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Owner
Steve has been
appealed.
working with the city attorney on our response
Yes.
to their memorandum that's
I
going to the
saw
court.
the appeal, or the response to the appeal, but I haven't had a chance to read it. But there's a hearing this Friday, correct?
That's correct,
And where is
9:30
that?
in Circuit Court.
Okay. Just for everybody's information.
I may, depends, I may also be out in West.
Well, Judy Diller had asked me, and I said I'd ask you.
Oh, Judy.
So we figured that since you were right there.
I wish I could be there, but I will be otherwise disposed. All right, thank you very much. Any other questions, feedback, comments? All right, thank you.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Last but not least, future uses of the Massey property.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
We just wanted to get, some of the fellow staff and I wanted to get some direction from you on some of the components of this project as it moves forward. First thing I can tell you is that City Attorney Mark Boyer prepared the agreements to send over to the county. He sent them over on April 24th. Mark and I have both reached out to the staff over there. If they have anything they wanted to review with us, we'd be welcome to sit down with them, and we're waiting to hear back from them on that. Ultimately, those agreements will need to come back to this body for you all to approve them, and we're hoping that happens maybe this month yet, but possibly maybe June. I guess I just wanted to walk through the memo and kind of look at each lot and just make sure that we understand your direction for each one, timing of it, and some of the details of each one. So the first, I guess, well, back up, I guess I'm referring to the plat that the county prepared, which breaks the remaining lands of the Massey property up into various lots. Lot 1 is what I call the former showroom building lot. It's 0.7 acres. Lot 2 is where the Vester House and the Meadowhawk Farm buildings are, which I call the possible park parcel. That's lot 2. And then Lot 3 is a small parcel in the rear. We'll talk about that in a second. First off, Lot 1, the former showroom building, it's our understanding that we want to move forward, anticipating that, obviously, that we're going to obtain the ownership of these properties from the county. We want to move forward with some sort of a RFP or what they call a competitive negotiated sale process. I guess the question we have is, should we start working on that? Should we, can I give direction to the staff and DCED to begin to prepare that information and get that together? So I guess that's my first question. Should we start working on that process?
Yeah.
And I did want to highlight in there some of the parking concerns that may raise their head later. Now downtown, the parking is not enforced because of parking decks in the general vicinity and public parking lots. But there is not an abundance of available parking for a lot that has 20,000 square foot building on it. So we could get into a situation where, if we're fortunate to have somebody that wants to develop this building, that we may need to find some other parking, either possibly help working with the library on their parking, some on-street parking, or I could see somebody asking to use Lot 2 for parking in the future. So I just wanted to raise that as a possibility. So
And also the loading dock is basically off of the library's parking lot.
correct. You have
For
to be
that
in the library's
showroom.
parking lot to get to it. And that was included in Mark's agreement that we would have an easement to that loading dock, depending on what the use of that building winds up being.
But you're just reciting this as information, right? You're not asking for a direction or something.
Right, I'm just saying that I could see
Those are
down the road that
considerations.
parking could be an issue on this parcel, and we'll have to
Yeah.
figure out then what we're gonna do about it.
Well, okay, I think.
And it looks like on the parking schematic page, you figured out that in that tiny little space next to the showroom, there'd be about 19 parking spaces, 2
Right.
handicapped.
Right. It's 0.7 acres, half an acre of its building, and 0.2 acres of it is what's available for parking, and that we could get 19 spaces on there.
Be smart to give it all you can, right? All the parking you possibly can.
Right. But that 19 spaces may not be enough to facilitate the reuse of that building, is all we're saying.
And maybe we should negotiate from the get-go with the library. I mean, that, we'll be doing a park that enhances their facility, get easement rights or something for the corner. I never see it being used.
I don't,
I mean, I don't know, I'm for sure, but you know.
I think it's something we want to keep in mind as
Right.
we go through this
Right,
process.
and I know you mentioned it, but I would hope that we could do that maybe while we're negotiating with the county, because they're semi, county.
As far as Lot 2 goes, the 2 buildings that are there, I think what I understand is we're going to move forward with demolition. I guess the question is, should we start putting the contract out to bid now, in anticipation of this, so that as soon as we own the property, we basically can have you all award the contract and get the buildings taken down? Do we want to wait till we get to actually acquire the property? And then how we're going to reuse the property, I guess, would be the next question after that. I guess my suggestion is what we've done on a couple other projects is that we've had a community meeting, and we've put together some very, very broad concepts of what the area could be used for as a park or a green space, and let the community kind of give us feedback on what kind of maximizes what benefit that they would see and what would maximize that benefit. We can start working in that direction, but the first thing would be to put the demolition contracts together.
Is there support for that? To go ahead and get the demolition contracts ready to pull the
Yes.
trigger?
Yes.
I want to just mention, and I think it can still work, but in order to fund this thing, instead of having to lay out somewhere up to $100,000 or more in general funds, I suggested to Michelle and Bruce yesterday that we think about packaging this thing as one project, one park project, definitely a public thing, and definitely a long-term public project, and, and funding it out of bonds in 2016. And I think you could do that, as long as we package this all as one project. And I've asked Michelle, it was just late yesterday afternoon, so I don't know if she has any additional thoughts, but we thought that might be a feasible way to fund this. We still don't know the park cost, but we can put a placeholding figure in there for that, and that way we've got the funding covered. And if we start now, I think we could probably still do it as long as it's a project in motion now. When I talked to Michelle, she agreed we could probably still do that. And that's how, if we can, that's how I think we should do it. I'm not sitting here saying we've, nailed everything down, but that sure would save us a lot on this budget crunch we're going through.
You present a really interesting and good idea. It would be nice, however, if we could first figure out some way to get those buildings down to eliminate the
Well,
eyesore.
that's $67,000, and I'm saying, I think we might be able to move ahead. The park itself is, I'm trying to get that 60, whatever it was, 65,000, 67,000.
We think to tear the buildings down will be about 40, and then remove the asbestos will be 20, 30,000,
Well,
something like that.
okay,
So
67,000, I mean, that's what it is. So, no, I was trying to get that 67,000 to make sure it's incorporated, and we can bond fund it, even if we, and moving ahead as soon as we can. That's what I ask them to work on.
Okay, well, that's a good idea. I mean, we don't have any funding.
Don, I'm just trying to keep us from having another $67,000 obligation in general
Yeah,
funds.
yeah, okay.
Councilman, when you say one project, you're talking about on lot 2.
Oh, excuse me, I'm only talking about Lot 2. I'm not talking about the
Okay,
Massey
okay,
building.
okay.
Paul, thank you, Bruce. I'm only talking about
I thought
that.
you were talking the whole works.
No, the whole works, no, we distinctly have to keep it on Lot 2. Because the other thing, we may spin off, and we can't, but,
Taxable bond.
yeah. No, well, the other part, we don't know what we'll do, if anything. If we do the parking, we're gonna have to do that, probably out of general funds, because we may be spinning that off to another person.
Yeah,
Of
private
course, they
entity.
might be building it, but if we have to move the entrance there or something like that, that we probably can't bond fund because, we don't know what we're gonna be doing with that building and what its disposition is. The park, we know, so it's only Lot 2 that I'm talking about.
Correct.
Thank you.
Would that approach create any delay in what I've heard the goal to be to demolish and remove those buildings by this summer?
I've asked Michelle to look into it. The subject just came up late yesterday. For $67,000, I think we ought to think about that approach.
And for me, I'm not interested in any approach that doesn't accomplish the goal of removing those buildings by this summer.
And we're working.
Well, we could probably do that. Tell me if I'm wrong, Rodney. We could probably do that out of general funds and backfill that with bond money, couldn't we?
But let me back up and address, I think we had several questions. So, Councilmember Brubaker did mention this yesterday. I have reached out to our bond counsel, and I'm just waiting on a return phone call. With the way that tax exempt bonds work, there is an 18-month window. So if mayor and council decided that this is what we're doing, and we spend that money, say June, we have 18 months to get that bond done, completed, and the money back in our account. If it's any further delayed than that, we cannot reimburse.
Okay, but so that works. Yeah, that's a perfect
That's
answer.
what I was.
As long as we can
I
bundle
just
the
didn't wanna be
demolition
the
with
one
that.
saying that.
Okay.
And
Marty just pulled a rabbit out of the hat, so we're.
Well, we just want to double check with our bond counsel. We want to make for certain that we can do this as part of our tax exempt and our bond issue and package it as one.
It is tax exempt as can be, because there's no intent on this council to turn that lot over.
over private hands.
There's no intent that I'm aware of.
Is,
And so, I think that's without dispute, as long as we limit it to the Lot 2, that's just the park.
Public purpose.
The park portion.
And, make that clear.
It's the demo cost that I want to double.
Right,
I
so-
just want to double.
Well, again, you've got to emphasize that it's one
I
continuous
understand.
project. We're still working on Phase 2, redeveloping it, but
Yes.
it's necessary to do the park. You can't do the park without tearing the buildings
but
down.
within those bond obligation documents, you don't need to specify what that park is.
We do have to actually, within the bond documents, we will have to outline all the projects just like we have done. If it is not already separately included as a separate project, easily identifiable, typically from our budget book, we may have to do like one other,
But we
and
have-
she would tell us, one other formal notification where mayor and council will be taking formal action, maybe in the way of a motion,
But
just to
The
declare our
budget
intent.
calls for an FY16 issue, so.
Yes, it does, and
That
we
would-
would just need to make sure that that specific project.
18 months is, by the time we actually spend the funds, it'll be into the year after the next fiscal year.
And that's cash back in
Right.
hand. And bond sales do take a good bit of time.
Right. But, I get the feeling it's the intent of the council to move forward as quickly as possible, so it's not infeasible as long as the county cooperates to.
Yeah, I could see, well, I think the best-case scenario is the night that you approve the sales agreement, we also approve a demolition contract.
Right,
Do it
but I mean, in
together.
terms of moving forward with the park as well.
Yeah, then I think we would start working on some sketches, we'd have those public hearings.
But we would have 18
Park
months.
probably won't get built till next
18
year,
months,
but-
as far as we understand it now, to,
To build the park.
no,
Well, to get
No.
to get everything
To-
finished,
to
the bond
get the bond proceeds back.
Gotcha.
ordinance.
But that's 6 months
Resolution.
beyond FY16.
But going to Rodney's original question, which was, is everybody okay with going ahead and getting the demolition contracts ready to go so that when we acquire the property?
Actually, to
we're
bid,
ready?
to bid it.
To bid
Right,
it.
to bid it,
Right.
Are you okay
assuming
with
this
us
is all
bidding
moving
it
forward.
now?
Yeah, okay.
Lou votes for it.
Okay, very good.
So that was everything for Lot 2. Do you want to talk about Lot 3?
Lot 3 is, it's only .06 acres, a very small piece of land that's in the back corner. It's behind some properties at 141 South Locust Street. I spoke to the county last week, and it sounds like what they're planning to do now, this has changed a little bit, but what they're planning to do now is just keep that lot. And I don't really know what they'll use it for, but they said that they probably would not convey it. If they do decide to convey it, it's difficult, their process to convey parcels from public use to a private entity, as I understand, is more complex than what ours would be.
They don't have like a regular quitclaim thing where it gets split between adjacent properties or anything?
Councilman Oshar, you might be able to speak to that, I don't know, but my understanding is that their process is just,
They wouldn't be
convoluted.
selling it, though. That's the thing. They're not selling them. It basically is a quitclaim, right?
I don't think it matters.
They want to keep it.
I think that speaks to also when the Board of Ed has to, when they're no longer using it, turn it back over to the county, and then the county has to go through a complex process
Right.
of disposal.
But at any rate, there is a chance that they may want to convey it to us, so that then we can do something with it, which I would most likely recommend that we convey it to the adjoining landowner, either for free or whatever the appraised value is at that time. But it's a very small piece of land.
Right.
I don't see any long-term benefit for us to hold that land.
And it's sort of like in the bottom of a,
Yeah.
Little bit of a hill
It
there.
definitely is, yeah. There's a picture of it in your packet. So we'll deal with that, I guess, as that plays out. So in the funding, I think what we're talking about is, as we said, about $60,000 to $70,000 for the demolition of the two buildings. Then the park development, depending on how we develop it as a park. Oswald Park up on Prospect Avenue, basically it's some sidewalks and one monument. That was about $50,000. Granawalk Park on North Locust Street was about $100,000. That has a little bit more of an active play area, but it's also very small. So I would see a park on this parcel anywhere from $50,000 to like $150,000 is probably what we're talking about. And I think we talked through the funding of how we're going to do that.
crowdsourcing is an interesting concept.
Depending on what the
Park.
use would be, there is potential there that, if it's some sort of a park for tolerance or protection of some sort of freedom, you could get funding from a crowdsourcing. There's a
Like
possibility there.
buy a brick type of a thing?
Yeah, or, you just throw it out basically to the World Wide Web.
Peace-loving community.
Yeah,
You mentioned in the memo, but you want to just address you had a meeting with the synagogue.
I did. Representative, I met with Monda, and we had a good discussion down there. Their proposal is to develop a monument, similar to what Oswald Park is, some sort of a monument, a little garden around it. that would be in honor of Thomas Kennedy. And that seems like a good use for that piece of property. They didn't have any resources to provide to the city to partner with us in any way or to help us maintain it, but that is just the idea that they, at the synagogue, would like this. It's
I'm
just an
sure if
idea
we
they're
have a
throwing out.
meeting in the community, they would be invited,
Absolutely.
and possibly even host it.
Have we had any further discussions, and Lou's gone, I'm sorry, but a public-private partnership? Because I thought I was hearing that beyond the idea of the thing, I mean helping financially.
Yeah, I think that's what Rodney's clarifying here.
Well, okay.
That all changed apparently.
I didn't hear anything that day when I met with them.
Right, and I think we need to keep pursuing that, because when people were
Well, that's sort of
pushing
what a
this kind of-
crowdsourcing effort would be. It would be sort of a
Okay.
public-private partnership, in a sense.
Did the synagogue commit?
I guess I didn't understand it that way, but.
Did the synagogue commit to buying the monument?
I asked Monda that, and she did not commit to that.
Well, she's not the only person that you would be talking to, right? I think that's why.
She's the
She
president of
was-
her congregation,
Well,
I
I know,
believe.
but still, Lou was still saying, I have to agree that, Lou was under the.
Well, there may be
opinion that,
individuals.
Okay.
Yeah.
There may be
there will
individual
help.
members who might want to contribute.
Right.
To some sort of
So-
crowdsourcing, crowdfunding effort.
Sure.
Well, it wouldn't have to be crowdfunding, I mean.
Right.
It could just be helping with the direct cost.
Sure.
Well, I think some of that comes out as we have the public meeting and invite them, invite the library,
Yeah.
all that.
Absolutely. I think,
Maybe we need to do a matching, but, when we do the funding for this thing, but we don't know what that is yet at this point,
Right.
so.
but going ahead with getting community input, I think is a good idea.
Well, we'll start the process on the former showroom building. We'll start we have started getting the demolition contract together, and we'll keep working with the county on the agreement.
All right, keep us posted.
Okay?
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Well, look at this, we're a little bit ahead of schedule. Mr. City Administrator, do you have any comments tonight?
No comments from me.
Ms. Nye?
All right, Bruce, get your pencil ready, because I couldn't get the people, so you're gonna have to do it. All right, the bicycle shop that is up on Prospect and Franklin, I see that it has been sold. I don't know who's going to do what, but I would be interested in finding that one out.
It's my understanding that they're reopening in the shopping center where Penn Avenue meets.
They
It's
have
located
reopened.
on Pennsylvania Avenue,
What the bicycle shop has.
the bicycle shop.
Okay, but there's somebody who has purchased where the old one is.
Oh,
and-
the building?
Yes, okay?
So you're wanting to know who the purchaser?
Correct, yes. I'm seeing more tattoo shops popping up everywhere. Also, cab companies are on the swing of things too, and we have one that's gonna be going into the Dagmar, and that would be Bonnie's Cab. I have no idea as to how many people she has as far as using the cabs, and there was another one, it's called Easy Transport, and I don't know where that one's coming from either. At one time, there was really, Demcor, I think, Deming had his taxis, and then we were just seeing transportation taxis, but now there's more.
So are you wanting
I
a
just would
discussion
like-
on a work session? on
No,
those, or-
no, I just would be interested in finding out as far as this Easy Transport as to who owns that,
Who is the owner?
yeah. And also, do we have any movement at all at the old sheets as far as looking into?
We had contact with the real estate liaison that we met with several months ago. He said their senior management were at a retreat. He would check with them to see if they had any updates.
I've been keeping tabs on that.
Okay, that's fine, because I had gone by that today, and the kid that was in the car with me said, hey, what are we gonna do with that? And I said, well, that's a good point, write it down. Also, the bar and grill that is on East Washington Street, obviously, there's a lot of activity that's going on there. I see that somebody had told me that they had been fined $2,000 for doing whatever with alcohol, but Friday night, my neighbor and I are actually riding the streets for about 2 hours, from 11 until 1. And we had some big-time problems that were out there. There were as many as 3 to 4 cruisers that night. I haven't contacted the liquor board yet to see what may have been going on, if it just ended up that it was outside, but I don't know if it started inside or not. Also, when we were discussing the part of windows and all of that, I was given a phone call, the old Barnyard Books. Somebody evidently had put a design on that window, the two windows, one in the front on South Potomac, as well as one on the side on Antietam. And it said, "Be the change." So I have no idea what that was
Probably
about.
the downtown movement.
I
Sounds like what they've been
have
doing.
no idea what it was about, but it was just literally painted on.
Sounds like the downtown.
That was it. I don't know. The question was, okay.
Aaron's saying yes.
Is that what it is? Okay. They had asked me, I rode by and said, okay, this is it. We have two homeless women that I'm actually seeing. I don't know if anybody else has or not. One has got her hair that it is braided. Evidently, she's the one who's sleeping in the city park. So, black hair, that would be. There was also another one that was sitting on the building across from, on the stoop, across from the rescue mission. She is one that was long hair, and it was actually kept up very well, carrying a lot of suitcases. So I didn't know if the police had a handle on that either. That's why I'm giving all this to you, because I don't have time to make all these phone calls. Fairgrounds Park, when we were doing our ride, I see now, and I don't know how long it has been, because we've not manned the gates for some time, but the gates are now open at Fairgrounds.
I noticed that.
And that really was not, because that park is would be so susceptible to anybody going in there, creating havoc.
And see, I observed the same thing. My assumption was
Yeah.
it's easier to patrol if the gates are open, and maybe that's why they're leaving them
No,
open. I don't
because,
know.
no. The bottom line, when this all came forward before, was a matter of locking. And if you had an officer, they could get out and open it. That's not that time consuming. But we did have the advantage of having the, fire police that were on Valley Road. I'm assuming they are still there. I don't know that for certain, but I know that there was a cutout that they were able to also go through. Well, see, the auxiliary and the fire police have joined, so I honestly don't know. But it can be patrolled like that, but I was actually shocked that it was open, because there can be a lot of damage. That's what happened the first time when one of the fields was destroyed. So, also, Bruce, it's called Shafts, and it would be the bar that is up on Salem Avenue. I'd like to know whether or not that is in operation again. I did see 3 gentlemen coming out of there carrying beer on Sunday, I believe it was, but I don't know if they're back in business or not. And Potomac Hall, is that going to be the housing for the Korean students? I believe it's Korean.
Chinese.
Chinese students.
I think it already is.
I don't know. I didn't know if they have yet put them there, because they were still, working.
I'm not sure. the
It's the
current status.
location.
It's gonna be the location.
That is the location. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
the
because
status.
where they are working on that, we've got people who are taking trash from off of their properties on South Potomac and dumping the trash there. So that was already put the attention up with Rodney. But also, we were at an event, oh, God. I believe, I don't know if it was last Friday or the Friday before, I think it was last Friday, and it was honoring Bob Everhart because he was retiring. And Bob Everhart passed away yesterday.
Did he?
Yes, he did.
Wow.
Yes, I got the phone call last night. I don't know anything other than there is
I know he had cancer.
something supposed to be, gave him 1 to 3 months, but that was like quick. Yeah. Something Wednesday night and Thursday, I don't know where, it has not yet come out in the newspaper. So it was very quick, very quick. Yeah. That's all. Thanks, Bruce.
Mr. Brubaker.
Yes, 2 things tonight. One is, I and this council was criticized in the paper for not showing proper support to the library nor immediate approval of the school board's proposal for the academic hub. I'll keep it short. There isn't a supporter of the library stronger on this council from the very first weeks I came on. I supported and fought for the library funding at the state. I fought for the city's contribution because I thought that was a definite economic contributor, no doubt about it. And I think it's proving out. And I think I am entirely within my rights to ask for small contributions to our downtown efforts in the term of notification at the library. And as far as the school goes, the academic hub goes, wow, all I said was I'll consider it. I think that's what the citizens would want me to do. I think that just tonight, an entirely different financing option came out. I think that it's doing my fiduciary duty to the citizens to look into things and consider the pros and cons and not just automatically back whatever is put in front of us. With that, I'll move on to a more pleasant subject.
Although, can I just interject? They did put a sign up about pointing to downtown.
They did.
Right. Well, it's really amazing what can come out of certain quarters. Taste of the Arts Thursday night. What a great event. My wife and I went around to the restaurants, all except one or two that we had been to before, but it was fun going around, mingling with the people that were enjoying the treats that were prepared, and at the same time seeing quite a few of them on a Thursday night having sit-down patrons. It was a great thing, a great project, so thank the Maryland Theater, the Arts Council, and all the others. Oh, and the Barbara Ingram, speaking of Barbara Ingram tonight, and the principal was there shepherding around the kids, just like he does at the crosswalks. But while the performances at the different food venues were great, it was a lot of fun to see. So another great event in Hagerstown. Enjoyed it.
Mr. Alshire.
Just a couple of things, and they're obviously in relation to the article today and our comments to appeal the decision of Judge Beachley for the legislation and charter amendment for binding arbitration. It's a little disconcerting when you read union representation say that they're disappointed that we would take such action. It's actually, as a citizen, a bit insulting. The notion that an individual that apparently doesn't live in the city would be disappointed that the body that's supposed to represent the citizens and have the taxable interests of the citizens of the city at heart, on the actions that we take. We didn't go out as a body and lobby signatures from citizens of this city under nefarious pretenses. Instead, we identified the constraints of this budget, and we enacted additions to manpower, and we implemented the first raises that employee group has seen in 5 years. Those are the things we did. And I'm actually a little embarrassed as a city council member that is the manner in which an entity that we are representative of would approach our citizenry and sell a bill of goods on an issue that we have, by and large, as an administration, acted in very good faith of. And I found it a little more odd, and I'm sure the attorney, you probably wrote this several times before coming up with exactly the right language, that no one would have responsibly expected an appeal and wasted more taxpayer dollars. Really?
That was amusing. Whatever.
I read that and just think to myself, responsibly expected? We are responsibly expected to review this budget that we've been doing for weeks, not hand it to some third-party person and say,
Give them a blank check.
here you go, here's our budget, whatever you want to do to the taxpayers, however you want to tax them, and, you know, carry out the duties of this body and place upon it the burdens of the cost of its
Which is in
citizenry.
fact
Go
a
ahead.
delegation of the legislative function, which is the point of our lawsuit in the first place, and the point of further appealing this, not to mention all the other unanswered legal questions.
And for me, I want to make this very clear to the citizens, very clear to the unions. And I said it to this body the other week when we considered, you know, whether to appeal. I'll be the first to say, fine. We lose that appeal. Let's make the charter amendment. You heard it here from me. I'm fine with that. I'm not afraid of that. Because I don't envision any piece of legislation by ordinance that would be required to enact that actual charter amendment that I could envision supporting, because I continue to believe.
But the charter amendment, council member, says you shall pass an ordinance.
So somebody's going to have to stand there and you know, convince me that I'm required to vote for an ordinance in a specific manner, of which is not a function of the process of simply placing something in the charter. So,
Thanks. Sorry I interrupted. Mr. Munson.
Finally, and I'll be brief, my wife and I went to the Symphony Saturday night. They had their Motown night, the
You were
Maryland
dancing in the
Symphony,
seats?
the Maryland Theater, and it was incredible. There were over 1,100 people there. They were clapping and cheering for most of the concert.
Well, that's
There
good.
was excitement, energy. It was just fabulous. And it was a group called Spectrum, which sang a whole bunch of Motown sounds. Oh, they only had one song outside of Motown, and that was a Beatles song, which they made sound like Motown. It was a great evening.
That'll be acceptable. Well, I just want to offer a few things here. I did attend the unveiling of the public art at the Washington County Library. Our journey transports us through time. It was a beautiful event. Happened to be a little rainy, so there were students from the Barbara Ingram School who were playing a little concerto in the bottom of the library there, and it just filled the library with beautiful sound. The piece of art is really outstanding, and we're very fortunate to have a piece of Toby Mendez's art here in downtown Hagerstown. I do believe people when they say that there are folks out there who will be attracted to this piece of artwork, who will visit it. I understand the library gets 1,000 people through the doors there, and I hope that we'll be able to find some way to provide a contribution toward it somehow or another. But I want to thank Toby Mendez, and I'm going to take him up on his offer to tour his studio, too. I was very happy to receive that invitation, so if anyone wants to join me on a field trip, just let me know. The other thing is that, just want to remind folks that the Bike with the Mayor is this Saturday. There's a lot of stuff going on this weekend. The Elizabethtown East is also having a block party, the neighborhood's first group here in downtown. Wine Down Friday is this Friday, blues, brews, and barbecue, so hopefully we'll have good weather for that and a great turnout. Like I was saying, the Elizabethtown East Take Pride in Your Neighborhood Day block party will mean that the street locus between Washington and Franklin will be shut down beginning at 10 a.m. Saturday morning. So a detour route will be established, and it'll be open approximately 5:30 p.m. Emergency vehicles obviously will be able to pass through. I also want to congratulate the Discovery Station on their superhero 5K. They had their first superhero 5K this past Saturday, and I think they had over 200 participants for their first one, which is not bad. The weather was perfect for a 5K. And I would congratulate them on their 10-year anniversary, which is coming upon us. I know there's a special event coming up in a couple of weeks.
Are they staying in place, or are they going to be moving?
Don't have any answers to that. But certainly, Also, I want to congratulate the Humane Society. They had an open house on Saturday, and boy, I really hate going there because I just want to take a dog home every time I go. I have my eye on one now, but I just can't. I wish I could. And Penny, it was saying, "Take me home."
No.
Terrible. It's a great facility, though. If you haven't been out there, it's really, really, they have some great stuff going on. So congratulations to them. And with that, we will be adjourned. Thank you.